Okay, thank you for your patience on there. So as I was saying, if there's anybody else that would like to speak regarding the Pledge of Allegiance, I will open up the public comment on there. And I'm going to take the public, and then I'll address your speaker card. Is there anyone else that would like to speak on the Pledge of Allegiance? Mr. Barrett.
Mr. Moore, may the lady go first?
Mr. Barrett, go ahead. I will allow Ms. Halderman to speak.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good evening, Council. For the benefit of the audience, my name is George Barrett. I'm a former City Council member here, and I'd like to welcome everybody to the meeting. I'd like to welcome everybody at home in Cotati and Rohnert Park as well who are viewing in on this meeting. I'd like to speak to the Pledge of Allegiance, the Council, and want to thank you that we still have a Pledge of Allegiance here during these meetings. The fact is that I appreciate very much that we still have the Pledge of Allegiance because it was some years ago that the Council almost lost the Pledge of Allegiance. When I was on the Council, we had a City Council member, the late Mayor Bob Coleman, who had suggested on a future agenda item that we consider maybe removing the Pledge of Allegiance from our proceedings. And we talked about it for a moment, and Pat Gilardi, Councilwoman Pat Gilardi, had said, I don't think we're ready to go there yet, and I also agreed and said, I don't think this is a good idea. But I would like to review why maybe this came up and how this might help us in the future going forward regarding the pledge. See, Mr. Coleman never said the Pledge of Allegiance, and he had every right not to say that Pledge of Allegiance, as anybody in this room has that right to pledge or not pledge. But he felt that somehow he was being victimized, or it felt uncomfortable that we were all saying the pledge and maybe he didn't. There were references in the pledge. For instance, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. And if you knew Mr. Bob Coleman, he didn't feel comfortable about pledging his allegiance to the flag or the United States of America. We've had conversations about this. So he found it offensive. He also did not appreciate the part of the pledge which was one nation under God. And he would be very open in speaking about this because he was a devout atheist. He did not believe in God. So surely he did not believe in one nation under God. So he felt that, it was uncomfortable for him to maybe be put through that process. But we still have that process, and we still have the pledge. And I don't know how many of you believe in one nation under God. It is an interesting concept because we've never talked about it. It never came up in the discussion about the pledge. But maybe at some point you'd like to discuss whether you believe this is one nation under God, and whether you actually adhere to the pledge, or whether you're actually having this on the agenda out of just convenience or some kind of political correctness. I think Bob had a point to be made that maybe we do need to look at it from time to time and make sure that it is copacetic with the council and what it means to you. I know it means a lot for me, yes, sir. And I do appreciate that we still have it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak on the Pledge of Allegiance? Ms. Alderman, please.
I'd like to point out if this change in Mr. Barrett going first, that the Rosenberg rules of order have not been approved. We are under the Roberts rules of order. Thank you.
That is correct.
And that wouldn't have happened at any other meeting.
Thank you.
Every council meeting, you all dutifully say the Pledge of Allegiance. I hear you all say the words, but I wonder if you feel and comprehend what you are saying. Do you comprehend the last part of the Pledge of Allegiance? Do you believe in justice for all? Do you know what justice for all means? Let me give you all some definitions. 1, the quality of being fair and reasonable, from Webster's Dictionary. 2, just behavior or treatment, from the Oxford Dictionary. Some synonymous words are fairness, fair play, equity, even-handedness, impartiality, honest in morality. If you were all truly honest with yourselves, knowing the meaning of the words of the Pledge of Allegiance, do you feel the Pledge of Allegiance is honored in these council chambers? My thoughts are these words and this pledge isn't honored in this room at all. It's time with the new year now that these words were truly felt and honored by you all and reflected in your actions in this council chamber.
Thank you. Anyone else want to speak on the Pledge of Allegiance? Seeing no one, I'm closing citizens' comment on the Pledge of Allegiance.
Mr. Mayor, if I might make a short comment, a brief comment.
Absolutely. Councilman Landman.
Thank you. Since the subject's been brought up several times, and since Mr. Coleman Singor has been brought up several times, I think it's worth making a comment just to correct something. And I'm reminded of what Mayor Coleman Singor used to say from this dais a lot, and he usually said it with a smile, and he would look over and smile and say, "Tell the truth, George." And I'm reminded of that because although you told us previously that you made arguments against removing the Pledge of Allegiance, and I believe tonight you said that you argued you didn't think it was a good idea, and personally I would agree with you, I wouldn't think it would be a good idea either to do. That's not what the record shows. You challenged me some weeks ago to actually do my research, and I did, and Mr. Jim Sweeney did post a transcript of your comments after you challenged him on it. And I'll try and make this as brief as possible, but basically you indicated you believed that the issue of the Pledge of Allegiance would be facing you as a council soon. You said that you could see the handwriting on the wall. You didn't think there was any doubt that's where we as a council were going. And your quote was, "And if that's where we're going, so be it." And then you finished your comments later by saying, "If the Pledge of Allegiance ever removed from this body's beginning ceremonies, I will stand outside and make my pledge to the flag that's out in the front steps. I don't need to be in here to do it." Bob brings up an interesting point. When you're in here, it's a different thing. I just want to say that's not exactly fighting the idea. So what I'm asking for is a little more historical factualness. If we're going to do historical perspectives, particularly about people who aren't here to speak for themselves, let's at least stick to the record. That would be helpful, and I thank you for that.
Thank you. We're done with the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. We're going to move on to the next item. So at this particular time, I'd like to seek an approval of the minutes and notice a waiving of the reading of all the resolutions.
Move to approve.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. And now the city clerk would like to address our housekeeping items.
Thank you, Mayor. For the benefit of everyone in attendance, please observe the following. Silence electronic devices, including cell phones. Audience members are advised that the chamber and hallways carry sound, so please keep conversations to a minimum or conduct them outside the building. Photographs or video recordings using tripods or other means that may be distracting are to be taken only from the designated media area along the south wall of the chamber. Members of the public wishing to address the council are asked to complete a separate speaker card for each item. Speaker cards are located on the table inside the entrance to the chamber. Place the completed speaker cards in the designated tray located by the city clerk, and when their name is announced, speakers should come forward to the podium and direct their comments to the city council.
Thank you, Ms. Taylor. And now we're going to move on to announcements. I will open up the public comment regarding the housekeeping items. Mr. Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. I'm sure you're not surprised I'm speaking on this item because I've spoken on this item for over 2 years now. I'd like to speak to what have been called housekeeping rules in the past. These have been called housekeeping items. They've been called house courtesies by Mr. Moore. There was a time when these housekeeping rules were actually listed one by one on the agenda. They are no longer listed one by one on the agenda because I've clearly, I believe, clearly have illustrated that the city of Cotati has never had any housekeeping items that anybody has ever voted on in the last 50 years of this town, that these housekeeping rules or items appear to have been made up and conjured up behind closed doors in somebody's office, out of public view, without public comment, in violation of the Brown Act, in some serial meeting that somebody put together that was a clear violation of the law, somebody came up with these silly rules. And to date, only Mr. Moore has had the ability to try to clarify that these are somehow some house courtesies that we need to put into writing without any public comment. Now, I've been commenting on them after the fact. What I've been trying to say is that we need a healthy discussion about this before you put rules into effect over public objection or out of public view. And I understand later tonight you're going to be talking about maybe instituting some new housekeeping rules, but the fact is, I don't understand why. Because if common courtesies have worked up until this point, why do we need to change it? You've been defending these as common courtesies. Now they must be codified. I don't get it. You guys want it both ways. The fact is, the rules have been silly. There's been no need for them. As long as I've ever been here, there's been no disturbances. There's been no camera tripods in the room. Rarely, until very recently, have we even seen the press at these meetings. I wanted to put a press table up over here for the press, and that idea was shot down so these journalists can be comfortable in their setting. But the fact is, the housekeeping rules have been just silliness and really a cruel hoax on this community. I think you owe the community an apology for being stubborn and silent on this issue for over 2 years, wasting everybody's time and trouble. And I'd like to acknowledge the fact that I've been the one to try to bring this to the forefront of the city council, and hopefully we're going in the right direction. And you can thank me for that too.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to address the housekeeping items? Seeing none, I will close public comment on the housekeeping items, and we will move on to announcements. The City of Cotati has special open office hours on Monday evenings from 5 to 7 p.m. in the Community Development Department at City Hall as part of its Cotati Open for Business program. This program provides personalized assistance and information to developers, current Cotati business owners, and those interested in starting a new business within the city. Luna Park Cotati Regional Library hosts events for all ages, including arts exhibits, book clubs, and children's programs. All events are free and open to the public. For more information, call the library at 584-9121 or visit www.sonomalibrary.org. The Cotati Historical Society Museum is open regularly the second Tuesday of each month from 5 to 7, Saturdays from 1 to 4, and by appointment. For more information, call 794-0305. Citizens interested in receiving City of Cotati community alerts via text or email are encouraged to sign up at Nixle, NIXLE.com. Recreation is back, and citizens are invited to visit the city's webpage at cotaticity.org to complete a survey letting the city know what types of programs they'd like to see offered. The California Homemakers Association is doing its annual tamale fundraiser at Frog Song in Cotati from February 4th to 6th between the hours of 9 a.m. and 9 p.m. You can order tamales or volunteer your time by calling 591-9573. And I would like to reiterate that we have our annual Chamber of Commerce dinner recognizing our businesses and ambassadors to business in the community and Citizen of the Year, and this year's Citizen of the Year recipient is none other than Councilmember Mark Landman. Congratulations. And now I would like to go to the Honorary Mayor, Mr. Robert Hepburn. Please come on up.
Good evening. Thank you for having me back. Tonight I'd like to start off with the homework that you assigned me last week, which was to talk to my peers about recreational activities they would like to see in Cotati. And before I start, I would like to hand you guys copies that I made of the survey and their results.
You know, Mr. Hepburn, there is no grade on this, right?
Okay, so how I organized this was I got together with 6 friends, and we sat down and talked about things that we were interested in that we thought other people would be interested in, and we just put them down, and then I turned it into a survey. And I approached people at school during my classes and at lunch. I would go to friends or just random people that I saw, and I had them put tally marks next to the things that they would be the most interested in. So let me read out for the people who don't have the things, and
Thank
I'll say the number of tallies marked to each one and the percentages. So I asked 75 people at school of these recreational activities: zipline course, teen field trips around the Bay Area, dance lessons, dirt bike track, teen center, study hall, affordable go-karts, pool, community service program required to graduate from Rancho, skate park, expeditionary learning center, outdoor movies, cooking classes, CPR and first aid classes, and a soccer field. So for the zipline course, when you took the survey, you were allowed to put a tally next to any of the activities that you were interested in, instead of just saying just one of them. So next to the zipline course, there were 56 people who said that they would like doing that, but it most likely isn't going to happen, but it was just a thought. So that was 74.66% of the 75 teens. And then the field trips around the Bay Area got 26 tallies next to it, and that was 34 people, or 34.66%. And then the dance lessons got 13 tallies, and that was 17.33%. And the dirt bike track got 14 tallies, and that's 18.66% of 75 people. And the teen center got 50 tallies, which is 66.66%. And the study hall got 10 tallies, which is 13.33%. The affordable go-karts got 31 tallies, which is 41.33%. The pool got 33 tallies, which is 44%. And the community service program required to graduate from Rancho, which is 40 hours of community service, got 17 tallies, and that's 22.66%. The skate park got 14 tallies, and that's 18.66%. Expeditionary Learning Center got 7, and that's 9.33%. Outdoor movies, 35 tallies, 46.66%. Cooking classes, 23 tallies, 30.66%. CPR first aid classes, 16 tallies, 21.33%. And the soccer field got 30 tallies and 40% of the 75. And then if you chose the teen center, then, which is the next page, you went on to the next survey, which was things that you would be interested in teen center. So I'll read the thing and then just say the tallies. So it was air hockey, which got 15 tallies, video games, 32 tallies, TVs, 36 tallies, self-serve nail salons, 31 tallies, pool table, 15 tallies, study hall, 33 tallies, rock wall, 11 tallies, holiday parties, 32 tallies, frozen yogurt, 32 tallies, ping pong, 41 tallies, and dances, 30 tallies. And then on your guys' copies, there's a copy of the original survey, which is the last 3 pages. And is there any questions about that?
Not yet.
Okay.
And was that your presentation?
Or no, I still have the 2 other things that I was asked
Okay.
to speak about. Okay. So the 2 other things that I was asked to speak on were main events at school and in the community. It's pretty interesting and exciting. And what's been happening, we had a step-up day where we went to Rancho, and we looked at all of the elective classes. And today we had counselors from Rancho come to our school and talk about classes and what classes we wanted to do. And I wanted to say, since last time I was here, I said that I wanted to get English honors all 4 years, and that's going to be the first year I'm going to get. My teacher told me that she's recommending me for honors English, so that was exciting. And for the community events, the recreation's back, so that'll be affecting me because there's going to be more activities to be able to do, and that sounds like a lot of fun. And the new Super Burger, which I've had twice, and it's amazing. So, and that's it.
I don't know which one of you fine council members would like to follow that. Mr. Delasi.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm all over this.
Councilmember Delasi.
Robert, I'm a little disappointed this wasn't in color. I mean, let me just, but I'm going to let that go for right now. So this is pretty darn amazing. And some of these things, I've been writing some notes on here. First and foremost, our recreation director, who's not at the meeting tonight, we will make sure she gets a copy of this.
Yeah, and I have an extra copy just in case.
I figured you probably would have already emailed her, but okay, that's good. That's good. So, you know, some of these things, we actually have the facilities, like the very last one on your recreation survey is the soccer field.
Yeah.
Well, at Putnam Park, we do have a soccer field. It's underutilized. I have a question under recreational activities, the first page, halfway down, you have pool. I'm assuming you meant, as in on the other page, pool table, as in like billiards? Or are you talking
yeah.
swimming pool?
Well, on this one, the first one's the swimming pool, and then the
Oh, it
other
is?
one, is like a pool table.
Got it.
You know, like playing pool.
Okay, great. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
So there's, you guys came up with a really creative list to choose from. I'm impressed with the list you came up with. And I think, you know, there's, over the years, a number of these things have happened here in the city. And bringing the recreation department back, I think is a huge kudo for the city and for the kids here in the city and the adults. Keep in mind, some of these will be for adults, too. There's activities, because we do count.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know that or not, but we're important, these adults. So this is really, really impressive. In the teen center activity, you know, we have the classrooms over there.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, there was a teen center some years ago, and, you know, I remember a number of the items that were in that teen center were actually donated by local businesses and local individuals.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, I bet if we were to go back out, you know, we might get some of that happening again, just in case. So this is phenomenal. So
Thank you.
actually, I'm going to be contrary to the mayor. I'm going to give you an A+ on this. So I will give
Well,
you.
thank you.
It doesn't really mean anything because I'm not your teacher, but
Yeah.
thank you for this. This is great.
Thank you, ma'am. Councilmember Harvey?
Yeah, this is really good information. I do have a question, actually a couple questions. One, on the affordable go-karts, what did you mean by that?
Well, at Scandia, they have, if you knew, they have like those mini go-kart, the mini go-kart track. And me personally, my friends and I go to Scandia a lot, and we just have a lot of fun on the go-karts. And at Scandia, they're kind of expensive, but maybe if it was just like and there's also driven raceways, but that's like, we've tried to go there before, but it's just extremely expensive. So the reason I put affordable is so it's cheaper, so that maybe more people would be able to go and stuff.
Okay, that's an interesting one, and that's why I wanted to know, because I do happen to know folks at Driven, and I was wondering if that's what you meant. So maybe that's something, you know, we can check to see if there's not some discounts that maybe can move that forward. And then what types of field trips were you guys thinking about?
Well, we were just thinking like maybe going out like Point Reyes or stuff like that, or maybe stuff like.
We know a good guide for you if you want to go to Point Reyes.
And just like different trips that you could, like, let's say other teams could come up with and that were affordable, and just, yeah, things that we came up with. Yeah.
Great. Well, this is an awesome list, and I can't wait for the recreation person to kind of get hold of this list. And can I assume that if the recreation person has some further questions, that they can contact you?
Yes.
Great. Well, thanks. This is excellent work, and thank you for
Thank
your
you.
presentation.
Thank you. Councilman Lemon.
Well, Honorary Mayor Hepburn, I have to say, it goes without saying, I'm impressed with this. I think all I can say to my staff is, you better beware. I don't know if the public can get a sense of the quality of the work this young man does. I'm going to hold this up in a second. I will just comment how well done it is. I will also mention, I noticed that when you mentioned the zipline course got 74.66 of the 75 teams that you tallied, I did see our city attorney, Robin Donahue, quiver a little bit. And that's understandable, but actually, seriously speaking, this is really some impressive data, and it's perfectly timed because this is exactly the type of information our staff has been reaching out to the public for, and I think you've just done a marvelous job. Now, thinking the camera's over here, I just want to hold this up for the public and people who aren't here to see what you've done. I don't know if they'll be able to see this, but all the various recreational activities laid out, percentages, and again, 75 people, that's pretty good segment in a town this size. That's very impressive. Drilling down further in the next page on activities and all this, it goes without saying, I think this is wonderful. I would really like to see this go to our new recreation director and hear back what she can see, because just getting to take a quick look here, there's some interesting things that are very doable now. Maybe not the zip lines, although
Yeah.
I hear you, I would like that too. But there's a lot of things that jump out that seem to be greatly desired and would be pretty easy to do, I think, here. So this is going to be very beneficial. So I'm just going to echo my colleagues and thank you so much for all the work you put into this, and close with two things. One, congratulations on Honors English. I'm not surprised, but good
Thank you.
job. And you mentioned now you're getting ready for kind of a big new adventure, moving to high school. A
Yeah.
very interesting time. As you can tell, it was a long time ago for me. But I remember it vaguely, and the one thing I want to say, with all the interesting things that will be happening, the best advice and I could give you as somebody who lives in the community with you is just you keep moving towards goals. They'll change on you. They always do, no matter what age you are. But as long as you keep doing what you've done so well, is moving towards those goals, you're going to do just fine. So I thank you very much for being such an excellent honorary mayor and helping us so much with this survey.
Well, thank
Nicely
you.
done, Robert.
Thank you, Councilman Lemon. Mr. Hepburn, thank you so much. I think that you have raised the bar when we talk to some of the honorary mayors and ask them to come back to us with some ideas and some input. I think this is well thought out, well-researched, organized, and presented in a very nice manner. I think you will be an excellent addition to our community once we have that teen center up and running. I can surely see you involved in that. I really appreciate the efforts you put into that. As Councilman Lamon indicated, the honors English, I'm sure, will not be a problem for you. I'm sure you'll do well in that. And I really do look forward to you participating in the community as you grow and you develop. And I'm going to encourage you to keep up the good work, and thank you very much for really taking it to heart. And this will be a lot of information that will be available to us as we grow. One of the other components I did want to reference was some of the field trips that were taken with previous teen center were to baseball games and things like that. So they were able to acquire some discounted tickets and do some fundraising. So those are always fun events, and
Yeah.
things like that. So again, thank you so much, and really appreciate it. And would you like to introduce who you're here with tonight?
Okay, so again, my mom's here, my brother's here, my grandma's here, and last time my dad was on a business trip and he was watching, but now he's here, and I have some other family members who are watching on the site.
Terrific. Well, they must be very proud of you, and I'd like to congratulate you and give you this certificate. So. And I know it's a school night, so you're certainly welcome to stick around for the remainder of the meeting, and if you have to go, we certainly understand that. Thank you again. And now I will open up the public comment regarding the honorary mayor program. Ms. Alderman.
I think young Mr. Robert is going to be our next mayor in a few years. He's very good. I have previously brought up that in the 1970s, I was on the youth council, and that was a very wonderful experience for me. And I would think Mr. Robert here would make a great initial person to be on it. He would be a leader. I mean, I would never have imagined to do as much as he did at that age. So it might be, with the recreation coming back, a good time to go back to the youth council. And I also wanted to tell Robert that in the 1970s, we held a dance. We earned $250, so you'll have to go to Damien or Norm to find out how much that is for a swimming pool. And so, anyways, very good job, Robert.
Thank you. Anyone else in the public like to comment on the honorary mayor program? Seeing none, I'll close public comment. Thank you. Okay, approval of the final agenda.
Thank you, Mayor. There's no changes.
Thank you. Now we will go on to citizens' business. Any member of the public wishing to speak to the council on any item listed on the consent calendar or any matters not posted on the agenda that are within the subject matter jurisdiction of the council may do so at this time. Pursuant to the Brown Act, the council is not allowed to consider issues or take action on any item not listed on the agenda during this period. Comments of any member of the public are normally restricted to a total of 3 minutes in length per person for matters not on the agenda, and a total of 3 minutes per person in length for items on the consent calendar. So with that, is there anyone wishing to address the city citizens' business that has not submitted a speaker card? Mr. Barrett.
Thank you. I want to reference the last city council meeting where Mr. Moore took the seat as mayor. I cannot believe that Mr. Moore would have had his family at that meeting, knowing full well that I was prepared to inform the public as to his criminal record. It was absolutely pathetic. Driving drunk in this town is a crime, a town that Mr. Moore says that he cares so much about. He was convicted of being drunk in public in a plea deal, and now he's mayor. And I'm getting calls about it, and I'm getting emails about it. What's going on? I'm going to share the letter from the police officer, the arresting officer, with the public. I'm going to put it on the board tonight. John Moore pleaded guilty of being drunk in public in his hometown. I mean, this whole fiasco is sick. He's got a huge problem, folks. Huge. Please don't enable him. Cotati's own dirty political trickster was voted in as mayor, who was actually appointed to the council before he ran again for council. He was appointed by the other political hacks on the council. Can it get any worse? That's what people are asking me. Can it get any worse? Yes, it can. How can you people sit there at the council and give John Moore a free pass? You all have family members who drive in this town. And you're okay with this? You're okay? Really? According to police officers that I know in this town, currently and former, John Moore's been driving drunk in this town for years, taking the back road around Cotati through Rohnert Park to get home. Even bar owners like Cheryl Nixon have covered for this guy. John is permanently banned from at least 2 bars in this town because of his bad behavior in those bars. That's a fact. Your leftist fanaticism is hurting this town, Mr. Moore. Have you people no shame? You need to resign, sir, and you need to get sober in order to run this town. Here's a letter.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak on citizens' business that has not submitted a speaker card? Okay. I have a speaker card here from Laurie Alderman.
Tonight's agenda is very telling of what is happening in the city. All agenda items are busy work and do not address the city's needs. For one important business matter should have been on the city's finances and a mid-year status report on how the city is financially. Damien's answer sounded professional last time in that he said the budget amounts hadn't changed during the year. That is not a financial status report. It is a financial status report is how much of each budget has been used so far in this fiscal year. There have been no items that have been presented in any agenda that tells the status of the city's finances. The books have been closed to the citizens since the meetings in June. How about an agenda item this week about storm management plans and whether the city is prepared and or if more monies need to be allocated? How about a resolution on the nuisance property on West School Street? Legally, the abatement was supposed to be finished by December 2nd, considering that the bank and new owners took possession on October 2nd. They had 60 days after taking possession. I beg the city to abate the property before the rains to protect the neighborhood's environment from the high levels of chemicals and metals on the nuisance property. The city has had the independent lab results for 15 months now. With the Valley Fire, the state can do 1,500 cleanups and abatements in 4 months, but the city of Cotati has not been capable of abating its one property in 19 months now. Get to work on what is really needed to do in the city right now, not busy work.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to address citizens' business? Seeing none, I'm closing citizens' business. Moving on. Any direction on the future agenda items?
I do have one. We have been asked by the Waste Management Agency to do a resolution authorizing the agency to administer the city-county payment program by each jurisdiction. I spoke to Damien about that, so I would like that on one of the future agendas so that we can get that taken care of.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question on that?
Absolutely.
Is there a deadline or a timeline for that?
That does not have a deadline, but they would like them as soon as possible, as soon as reasonable.
Thank you. Now we'll move on to the consent calendar.
I'd move to approve, Mr. Mayor.
Second. Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Let the record show that's a 5-0 vote, 4-0 vote, and Councilman Skillman absent. Now we will go to public hearings. Oh, my apologies, Miss Alderman. There were so many here. Let's see. I will open up the public comment regarding a consent calendar. And you have 2 items here on the consent, regarding the consent calendar, and those 2 items will be combined to a maximum of 3 minutes. Because that's the way we go. If you listen to the citizens' business, they talked about the consent calendar or any items not on the agenda. You had 3 minutes per.
Item agenda. So we ask for clarification?
Consent is
No,
one item.
well, go ahead.
As I read the language, Mayor, it is 3 minutes per item, whether it's on the consent agenda or whether it's a non-agendized item. So that would be a total of 6 minutes if there are 2 items that she wishes to speak on.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay.
Which would you like to speak on first?
The fines.
The bail schedule?
Yeah, bail schedule.
Thank you.
Busy work, that is what this item is all about. Putting the fines in one table. Whoop-dee-doo. How about addressing some of the enforcement issues behind all of these city and police fines? With my ex-neighbors, you did not enforce one single California building code in over a year. To my knowledge, they weren't fined either for any building code violations, which are on that new schedule, up to $500 per day. This is an example of how enforcement of city code violations are handled in this city. This is unequal and discriminatory treatment among citizens in this city that the city needs to stop now. Treat all citizens equally as this city, county, state, and nation was pledged itself to be at its founding, equal. Okay, that was you want me to go on to number 3?
Thank you. You're certainly welcome to.
Okay, hold on.
We'll restart that clock.
I have to find where. That's the ROP. Okay. This may seem like a straightforward agenda item, but there's quite a bit of goings on about the redevelopmental trust funds. Most of what the citizens are unaware of. There have been disallowed amounts in previous years. The Department of Finance has said that this $250,000 that the city charges for the administration of the redevelopment trust funds is excessive. Yet again, the city is charging $250,000. Doesn't a warning that the fees were excessive by the state matter to anyone in the city? I'm no accountant, but it looks like this year is draining the funds accumulated and bringing forward less than half for this of the ROP payment money. The 16-17 budget to the city than the 15-16 budget. The city failed an audit on its general books in 2013 and 2014 with substantial material errors. There were internal control problems that needed a plan of correction. This affects the distribution of previous agencies' funds, redevelopment funds. You do not just unanimously pass assignments as you do with all council votes in 2015. Take a second look and figure out if this is best for the redevelopment trust or the city overall. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak on the consent calendar items? Seeing none, I will close the public input on there. Does anything brought forth in the public comment alter your vote regarding consent calendar? Do we need an additional vote on that?
I think just for the record, it would be good to have a new motion and vote.
Terrific.
Move to approve?
And I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Aye.
Mr. Mayor, when in the future we have the opportunity, I would like to have a little further background on the issue of how much time is given for speaking on items in the consent calendar, because the 6 years I've been here, the practice has been a total of 3 minutes per person in length for items, not a total of 3 minutes per person per item. Maybe I'm misreading that, but I'd like to see that come back if we could sometime, so I can be better clarified on that. Thank you very much. Mr. Mayor, point of order. I'm being interrupted when I'm trying to speak. Could we have order in the meeting, please?
We moved on to the next item.
Thank you.
Then we have public hearings. So, Mr. Obid?
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. So this item is establishment of City Council rules, introduction of a companion ordinance amending Municipal Code Chapter 2.04 titled City Council and rescission of a resolution setting the City Council meeting date and time. So it's common in Sonoma County and throughout the state of California for city councils and other public bodies to adopt rules for efficient and orderly conduct of public meetings. In the City of Cotati, Municipal Code Chapter 2.04 provides a basic framework for city council meetings. And furthermore, Section 2.04040 explicitly allows the City Council to adopt rules governing meeting procedure. This authority also exists for all cities, including Cotati, under California Government Code Section 36813. And the proposed City Council rules, broadly speaking, cover a couple different areas. And one, I guess, sort of fundamental element is the parliamentary procedure process. Currently, in our existing municipal code, the council states that Robert's Rules of Order is the parliamentary procedure that we use as a council. And the companion ordinance that's proposed for introduction tonight amends, it's a pretty nominal amendment, but changes it from Roberts to Rosenberg's. And there really is no significant difference between the two parliamentary procedures. It's just that Roberts' Rules of Orders was intended for things like a national parliament, where there's a lot more going on, potentially, than a local governmental body. And so Rosenberg's Rules of Order are just a streamlined version, basically, of Robert's Rules of Order. And it's intended for local bodies that just don't get into some of the things that like a national parliament would. So that should hopefully be more usable and functional for the council moving forward. And then the other parts of the City Council rules that are proposed generally govern the proceedings, and they relate to processes such as how meetings are scheduled, the mayoral selection, order of business, rules of conduct, public hearing process, subcommittees, city boards, and City Council administrative support. And I will also add that the City Council rules also, because there's a lot of overlap in the previously adopted ethics policy, the City Council rules also incorporate that prior ethics policy. So it's superseded by the fact that they're merged together, essentially. And then the overlap is streamlined. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Councilman Colosso.
Yes, a couple of questions, and then actually there's a few just kind of minor editorials I want to make before we even open it to the public, because I just think they're just typos, I think is what they are. My first question is on public bodies. I mean, are we talking, obviously we're an elected body, and is this just, would Rosenberg's and or Robert's rules just apply to elected bodies, or does it go, I don't want to say further down the chain because that doesn't make any sense, but like say, what if it's an HOA or something like that? What are these typically written for? Because parliamentary procedure, it makes me think of, large elected bodies, like the Congress or the Senate at, state and federal levels. I don't know if you have an answer for that or not.
Well, I think, so Robert's Rules of Order are most, although they're commonly referenced, right. They're, like I said in the staff report, are more applicable to larger bodies like Parliament. Rosenberg's Rules of Order, so either one could apply to other types of like appointed bodies that are holding public proceedings, and they have a parliamentary procedure process.
So, but certainly in our case, we're mandated to use one or the other or both, a combination? Or we're not?
You're not.
Okay. All right, I was kind of curious about that. And if I could just indulge the group, the larger group here, on just a few minor editorial types. I'll try to find them all this first round, but I may miss a couple. So the first one is on page 8 of 32. And I just want to make sure I'm reading this correctly, too. And it's under Roman numeral 3, Rules of Conduct, item B, Rules of Decorum. And the second bullet, audience members are advised to keep conversations to a minimum or conduct them outside the building, as opposed to conducted. Okay, you don't have to agree or disagree. I'm just going to throw them out there, and you can make changes as you see fit, and I will check them off my list as I go along. And the following page, 9, under item E, introducing a motion, in the second paragraph, second line, refers to city staff as the presiding officer may designate, may verbally restate. Something must have dropped out of there. It's one or the other. Is it an and/or? May designate, may verbally restate? Just didn't make any sense. Not the grammar in my head, anyway. It almost seems like may designate and/or may verbally restate each motion. Do you see what I'm saying? Or is this attorney speak to not use proper grammar? I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there. I don't know.
Yeah, I think what makes that sentence confusing is that it says presiding officer twice.
Right.
Right.
So however you want to work with that one, I'll move on.
Yeah.
Jaren, I'm trying to do this as quick as I can. I promise everybody. Page 12, under item K, voting. I believe that second word, council members, should be singular. And if you don't want it to be, you don't have to. I'm just throwing it out there. Deliver. I have some editorials of comments I would like to see added, language I'd like to see added. I'm going to hold off on that. I'll come back to those, I promise. So, almost there. Hold on. Almost there. Okay, page 20. This may be one of my last ones. At the top, under Roman numeral 8, item A, appointments to city boards, commissions, and committees. The numbers are out of sequence there. Just fix that little thing. Almost there. All right, I will call it quits for now, but then come back after public comment because I do have some longer editorials. Thanks. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilman Lehman?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I have, I believe, about 5 questions for staff. I do have about 4 requests. I will hold those till after public comment to bring those forward for your consideration and get staff input that on as well. But in terms of questions, let's see. And my apologies, I'm doing this completely backward than my colleague. I wrote the pages down, but I wrote down packet pages, so not to confuse anybody. But if we go to packet page 34, authority, and I believe this is the first paragraph, and it mentions that the mayor or presiding officer has the authority up to and inclusive of removing any person who obstructs the orderly process of the meeting. And I just wanted to confirm the process in this or how this works. I understand that this presiding authority or mayor would have the authority to do that, but I'm inferring that would be done through a chief or the law officer or somebody here in terms of actually doing that. Because it states there's authority for this to be happen in this situation, but I just wanted to clarify how that process is supposed to play out. So that's one question for staff. If you want to wait till I get through these or take them one by one, I'll leave that up to you. Secondly, consent on page 37. I wanted to confirm we are moving back to the concept of doing consent comments during public citizens' business. This is something previously we did for a while, and then we kind of moved away. And I personally have no great concerned either way, whether they're done separately or together. I think both are fine, but I just wanted to confirm we're planning on moving back to calling for them both during citizens' business, because that's what this seems to indicate to me. Number 3, on page 37, let's see. Time management. It mentions that we might not consider taking any new agenda items after 10 o'clock without a vote. And I'm curious, and this might be a question for discussion later after public comment from some of the people who worked on this, why we perhaps wouldn't wait to 11 or something, particularly if we're shooting for a rough deadline of stopping business by midnight. That might seem flexible. So I'd like to hear, there might be something I'm missing why we picked 10 o'clock, because that does seem a little early. Let's see. On the top of page 46, packet page 46, it mentions disability accommodation, and I'm completely supportive of this, but my question perhaps for our city attorney, Ms. Donahue, would be legally what process there is to vet something like this. Now, I'd be very surprised to see anybody misuse this, but how do you prevent potential misuse of something like that? So you couldn't have a whole room full of people claim something like that and then take additional time and delay the process of the meeting. What legally, is there any way of doing that? How do you clarify that? Because I know certainly when it comes to things like that, there's certainly some privacy issues that we want to be very respectful of. And last, let's see, council correspondence. And this might be an easy one. On page 51, back at page 51, that first paragraph, and it's the last sentence. And it seems to indicate that all correspondence between a council member and the public would be copied to the full council. Now, I just want to confirm, are we talking if a council member is using city staff and city letterhead to send something back to a constituent? Or are we also including email through a city council member address? Because the first thing that came to mind to me with that is there could be some Brown Act implications potentially there. Quite often we have constituents who will write us, ask questions or our thoughts on issues that might be something that could come before the council later. So I'd want some confirmation in that because I'm not sure if that would be the best practice to institute. So I think we might want to look at that. And those are the questions I have for staff before we get to public comment.
Vice Mayor Harvey.
I have no questions. I've asked a bunch of questions over the last 4 years, so.
And if I may, there was a question I had on page 9. Let me flip to that. On page 9, paragraph G, types of motions, I believe it is the second sentence. These motions take precedence over the main motion and have property made, or should that be properly? I'm surprised Mr. DeLasso didn't pick up on that. No A for you. So do you want to do a little research on those questions? Or would you like to try to address those now and then we'll open it up to the public, or do you have a preference?
I think we can address probably most of those questions right now.
Okay. Yeah.
So please catch me if I miss something. One of the first questions was about authority of the presiding officer to remove a person from a council meeting, and if it were to come to that, typically it's an officer of the peace that would do that, perform that function. And you had a question on the consent calendar and the order of public comment on the consent calendar. And I reread that sentence that you were referring to, and there's actually a "or" that needs to be inserted there where it says, members of the public may comment on consent items prior to the council's consideration of the consent agenda or as an additional comment period during the citizens' business portion of the meeting. That's how it was intended to read. So it could be one or the other. It allows some flexibility. And then on time management and adjournment, so 10 o'clock, I think 10 o'clock just seemed like a reasonable time to reassess how the meeting was going, to see if everyone is up for another potentially up to 2 hours. At some point you start losing the public and the council. And so it's just a recognition that some of these longer meetings can, not be for anyone's benefit, and it's just a point to stop and discuss whether you want to proceed. So that's just where the 10 p.m. came from. And then on the ADA,
I'd like to ask for some forbearance on the part of council. I'd like to get back to you with an answer on that. I did bring some ADA materials with me tonight, but that particular issue is not covered, and I want to make sure that I give you a full and correct answer, so I will get back to you on that.
Thank you.
and I apologize, there was one more that you mentioned that I didn't write.
And that would be the council correspondence one, which says any correspondence using city equipment, resources would be copied to the full council. And I'm wondering if that is inclusive of a city email address, because then we could get into some Brown Act issues in terms to actually trying to reply to constituents appropriately too that might be problematic.
So right now, how that's being implemented is with physical correspondence. Mm-hmm. We get physical letters or things coming through the city that we're privy to. If it's an email, that's something we certainly can look into further, but there's no process around that right now.
And I imagine that was the intent. Perhaps I'd be satisfied with just seeing that called out somehow in this, and we'll get to that after we have public comment. I think it would be worthwhile separating the two in this description in terms of the timeline. Appreciate that. I think maybe we could go longer, but we can discuss that and see where the council want to go. So thank you very much for taking the time to open that up for me. I appreciate it.
Councilman DeLawson?
Yeah, maybe one thing we could consider on something like that, and I think we should address electronic correspondence with the public. So if someone was to send us something as an individual council member and we were to respond, what we could consider doing is carbon copy the city attorney and the city manager, and I believe at that point there'd be no violation of the Brown Act if the city manager then forwarded that to other council members. Is that correct? So that way you're kind of in the spirit of what you're suggesting there, but I think it is different. And I think electronic correspondence should be addressed, and it should fall in like right after that would make sense.
Yeah, I would be fine with that. I saw my staff wince when they realized the size of their inbox just got 5 times bigger every morning. But nevertheless, as long as we do something to make sure there's a call out between the two and we don't inadvertently cross that, I think it's great. Thank you.
Okay, at this point, I will open up the item for citizens' comments, public comments. Anyone would like to address this? Mr. Barrich.
Council, I've been asking for this for 2 years and not gotten one word from any of you, not an email, not a phone call or anything. 2 years, and this thing shows up on the agenda tonight. For the past 50 years that this town has been incorporated, it has been bound by Robert's Rules of Order. The city attorney is wrong on this. If it's not been specified, it is implied that you are bound by Robert's Rules of Order. However, they've never been adhered to as long as I've been coming to these meetings, and you all know it. You have thus far ignored Cotati's Code of Conduct for the council members. You have repeatedly ignored the Brown Act. Now this. I want to know who decided by themselves to put this item on the agenda tonight, because none of you have talked about it, putting it on future agenda items as long as I've been coming here. But now it's on the agenda tonight. Again, this has all been done behind closed doors, deciding that this item go on the agenda. This council continues to circumvent the process. Tell me, who gave city staff the directive to come up with this item tonight and put it on this agenda? I want that question answered. You are supposed to discuss what is going to be put on a future agenda during a council meeting, not behind closed doors or through emails between yourselves. That's illegal. It's a serial meeting and a violation of the Brown Act. I hope you turn one of each other in for this. You don't abide by the rules governing you now. This isn't going to change anything. This is all a bunch of window dressing. You should have discussed this openly, in public, whether or not to even put this on a future agenda. You can't even do that right. Now this, you've already decided that you're going to vote on this tonight by your discussion, so that's pretty clear. I think this is a total disgrace, what you've done. You need a public discussion on the House rules before you introduce new rules you have conjured up behind closed doors. If approved tonight, when does it go into effect? Surely you will have to put on a workshop so we, the public, know what's going on and how to proceed. And speaker cards are optional. And you, again, as I've said in the past, you must clarify to the public every night that speaker cards are optional. You must protect people's desire to be anonymous. And you still don't do that. And I don't think you're going to do it in the future either.
Thank you, Mr. Burridge.
Can I have another little more time, sir?
No, you may not.
Please, sir.
No, Mr. Burridge, thank you very much. Thank you. Anyone else like to speak on this particular item? Ms. Alderman, please. Yes, thank you.
For Mr. Landman, I would like to clarify that the ADA disallows, you do not, makes that illegal, that the whole one, that you do not have to disclose your disability, and you are bound under the Brown Act to do to follow the ADA. And so not many people fake their disability. They need it. I'm going to start on the rest. The city took a wonderfully efficient and modern version of the Rules of Order, the Rosenberg Rules of Order, which were made for City Council. A professor in Davis wrote these Rosenberg rules to foster open communication and free speech among the public and the council. What this council has done has perverted it from its pure form into rules of order that are now illegal, retaliatory, discriminatory, vindictive, targeted, punishing, blaming, and irresponsible. I've set 10 copies of the laws that prove some of these items to be illegal on the back table, or that they are not in the spirit of the Rosenberg rules. These are all on the modifications you made to the Rosenberg rules. There was a lot added and there was a lot modified for your convenience. The modifications and additions to the rules the city added are vague. If George or I step towards the well of this chamber like this, are you going to arrest me? That's what those say. It says nothing. If I take one step, do I get a warning? There's no clarifications on this. It's hard to tell with how the rules have been modified. Does the city like collecting reasons for citizens to sue them for violating civil rights? Didn't you listen to the judge admonish the city and the city's attorney in November for the disregard shown for civil rights? If you pass this item, you have passed every item in 2015 with Only one nay vote cast in the whole year, 98 of the time passing unanimously. You open up the city to more lawsuits. Do not pass this item.
Thank you, Ms. Alderman. Would anybody else like to address this item? Citizens' business? Seeing none, I'll close citizens' business. If I may, Mr. Councilman Landman, I just wanted to make a few clarifications. We've had a subcommittee regarding the rules going on for roughly 2 years, I believe?
4 years.
4 years that's been working on this. So this has now come to a point where it's time to probably address this. This would allow us to move on to conduct the business of the city in a professional, competent, efficient, and courteous manner. Thank you. Councilman Landman.
Yeah, I just wanted to point it out, and you've done that very ably, that we've had a subcommittee for some time. As a matter of fact, that's been no secret. As a matter of fact, when those assignments for these committees have been handed out, you've been present at those meetings, Mr. Barrich. Yes, you have. I remember your smiling face, my friend. So we've had this for some time. It's not much of a secret because it's in all the packets in our binders, certainly. It says right at the top here, City Council Protocol Policy, Vice Mayor Harvey and outgoing Mayor Skillman. So at any rate, it was a fair question to ask, how did this come about? You can be forgiven for having missed this, even though it's been in front of us for several years. But that's the answer for it. So, this is the second time I'm being interrupted. I don't know if the public can hear this, but I'm being interrupted from the audience when I'm trying to speak. And I just want to say for everybody in the audience and for the public watching this, I do listen, whether I agree or disagree or am just trying to form an opinion. I do listen attentively, no matter what's being said. I would gratefully appreciate the same thing from some other people in the audience. This ongoing disrespect is not helpful for an efficient exchange of ideas. And that seems to be the goal we all agree we want to see. So let's try and work towards that. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilman Lemon. Do we have any?
I would like
Vice
to
Mayor Harvey?
ask a question of
Sure
staff.
thing.
So could you explain a little bit about how subcommittees work and their work and how that gets brought back to a council?
Well, so generally subcommittees are assigned at a council meeting, and then they report back either periodically or they come back with some report on what the work assignment was. And in this case, the subcommittee came back with this item after working on it for some time. That's basically the outline of how a subcommittee works. And then the subcommittee goes away after the work assignment's done.
So the purpose of the subcommittee is to do a function, and when that function is done, that item is brought before the total council for them to weigh in on and decide whether their work is okay or they have to go back and do some more work. Correct?
Right.
Okay, thank you.
I would imagine after 4 years, we're hoping we don't make you go back for another 4. We'll see.
Thank you. Councilman Palazzo.
Sure. Yeah, I don't see, I know a statement was made of how we can circumvent the process when it's an agendized item and it's brought here for public input. And so I don't see where we're circumventing any process. When I read through this at least 3 times, the impression I came away with is these are more rules of behavior more for council than for the audience. I mean, really, it says, you know, these are how motions are made. These are the types of motions. I mean, so I don't really see this. None of it is illegal. I'm not an attorney, but none of it is illegal. Having read all the emails that have come in and hit every link that was on those. There was a question on, well, when are you even going to adopt it? And again, in the draft ordinance, it says 31 days, the 31st day after it's accepted. So there it is, which is how every ordinance since this city and other cities have been established do those things by law. So just throwing that out there. That's out there. And I have more edits. We ready for more edits? The other ones were just grammatical. These will be a little bit more in the form of a discussion. Let me see. We did not address the issue under on page 7 of 32 under time management about the 10 p.m. I know Councilmember Landman brought that up, so I think just let's not lose that. It's a bookmark. Let's not lose that one. Getting back in here to my notes. And/or properly, sorry. Trying not to be delaying here. There's just a lot of pages. We did that one. Okay. On page 15 of 32, and this is just, it's an editorial comment I'm throwing out there, and we can, if council is willing to write it down, and then we can agree or disagree to vote on something like this, but it's in the top item 6, which is council interaction with public, and a little bit more than halfway down, it looks like the sentence begins, if a council member believes that a material misstatement of fact has been made by a person, the council member may ask the city manager or city attorney briefly to correct or otherwise clarify the matter, or the council member may provide a brief, direct response at that time. I'd like to add, without interrupting the speaker. So just throwing that out there, and we can agree or disagree on that comment. Speaker cards is clearly addressed, and it's stated twice in there, not required, 2 times in one paragraph. I think that's pretty clear. I'm sorry, thought somebody was saying something to me. Page 16 of 32, item number 8, speaker's location, where it refers to the well. It says nothing more than, speakers shall address the council from the podium provided for that purpose and may not enter the well in front of the council dais or other area during their comment. Any written materials or items should be submitted or shown to the council should be given to the city clerk, and he or she, in this case she, will distribute them to the council. It doesn't say anything about taking a step left or right and consequences. And you know what? We can clarify that. It's like, you want to take a step to the left and look silly? Anybody's willing to do that, but then we can't hear you because you'll be further from the microphone. So if we want to clarify that just a little bit more, I guess we can. I don't know that there'd be any consequences. I think there'd be serious consequences if somebody charged the dais, but other than that, I can't really see any other reason, and I don't know that we want to say anything like that. But there's no consequences here. Page 17 of 32, under item C, which is public discussion at hearings, item 2, council questions of speakers. Again, about halfway down, the sentence reads, interaction with the speaker will be limited to a question or questions rather than an ongoing dialogue. Then it goes on from there. I was going to suggest interaction with the speaker will be limited to a question or questions for clarification. Again, not that this becomes this dialogue, but to clarify and what is it you're really asking or saying. I think it's important that we know exactly what the speaker is saying if, for some reason, we don't know. So that's just offered up for another suggestion. And did that one. And I guess the very last one in the draft ordinance, which now is at packet page 59, we would want to change the name of the mayor. But I figured that was a draft anyway, so it's an easy fix. So those are my comments for right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Delasso. Councilman Landman, did you have anything further?
I do. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, yes, in terms of discussion, I look forward to hear what people think about 10 or 11 o'clock, and I do have some flexibility on that, whatever works best. In terms of interrupting the speaker, I agree with the concerns. My reading of this, I got the sense, that, and I think that should be implied, and maybe we need to state it, but my sense was this was for after either citizens' business or public comment had completed, in which case that would be a natural time, and you by that direction wouldn't be interrupting anybody. So maybe that's implied, I don't know, but I like the idea. In terms of the location, I'd agree. I think it's good to make it clarified, since we've had some question for some folks. If I'd like to write it tonight, I'd just say, behave like Honorary Mayor Hepburn, and everything works fine, because that's exactly the way that should work. In terms of dialogue with speaker, I like the idea that we're looking for clarification as an ongoing back and forth, because that's really not supposed to what's to happen at that point. I think that's a very good idea. I have 4 requests, suggestions, in the same manner as my colleague here. And let's see, on this is an easy one. On packet page 33, towards the bottom, at the very bottom, the last B, role of mayor, item 2, mayor and vice mayor absence. The item is for who runs the meeting if the mayor is absent and the vice mayor as well. And the suggestion, I believe, is a good one. It suggests that we discuss it on ourselves, who we're going to select to run the meeting, and then have a vote. But in terms of efficiency and to save the public and us just a little time, I'd like to recommend something that I've seen done in many of the other committees and board of directors throughout the county, where it's the outgoing mayor can do that. That way it saves us the time of discussing amongst ourselves who's going to get stuck having to run the meeting, and it's logical. And if we wind up in a situation where the mayor isn't here, and the vice mayor isn't here, and the outgoing mayor isn't here, we're not doing any business anyhow, because we only have 2 people left. So I put that forward. I think it's just a small efficiency we can have. And let's see, our next one, page 38, rules of decorum. And let's see. I'd like to put forward something to add to where we have our rules of decorum there. And this was something I tried to do as a mayor, but it was also brought forward fairly recently by Ms. Alderman. And I think it's a very good idea. I think it's a best practice. And it could be worded something along the lines of the presiding officer shall request the audience to withhold applause in the interest of time management and encouraging the full expression of different views. I think that's a good idea. We've all seen that sometimes the tyranny of the majority can stop a minority from expressing what they want to express. And I don't care which side is which. I think here there would be some value in adding that. So that is something I'd like to see, and I appreciate it being suggested, because I do think it was a very good idea. Let's see, we're getting there. Bear with me, my friends. Speaker cards on page 44. And we almost don't actually have to turn to the page. Here's my concern. I think everybody here in this dais and in this audience and staff all agree what we want is to have as fair as possible input for everybody to be able to speak on something with no advantage for one group of people or no disadvantage for anybody else. And my concern where we're going with this is for the people who do fill out speaker cards, although they're not required to. This is something everywhere they have meetings, they use these. And it's very helpful at keeping track records of who's spoken so we can make sure the minutes are right. They basically turn their cards in. What usually happens is a presiding officer, a mayor, will shuffle them up so there's kind of a random order, basically. But for people who don't fill them out, and this is okay, if you don't want to fill them out, you don't have to, but they kind of have the ability to raise their hand when they want to, or perhaps have the last word on a consistent basis. And I don't think any of us would want to see something like that. So what I wanted to suggest was this. Perhaps the presiding officer, when he's collecting the cards, the speaker cards, one blank card could be put in for that random shuffle, and when that blank card comes up as you're going through it, that is the time for people who do not want to fill out a speaker card. Now, of course, it's quite possible by the end of public comment, somebody might hear something that makes them decide they want to speak. It could happen. It could even be somebody that hasn't filled out a speaker card, and I'm fine with that. But I think in general, I certainly hope at least that most of us here would abide by that in the general, with the exception of that case, and we'd have a fair system for everybody, because I don't want to see people leverage something to take advantage of it, and I don't think any of us want that. So just a suggestion. I'd be certainly happy to hear staff's ideas on that well, but I think that would be a good thing to do. And those were the main things I wanted to request or suggest for additions. I am going to say I want to take a second and thank a lot of work that's been put into this by the subcommittee that worked on this for a long time. I think this will tend to be a big improvement for what we do. Love Rosenberg's rules of orders. I actually got to see Mr. Rosenberg present on this up in Sacramento, and it makes a lot of sense. It's designed exactly for city councils. This level, it's a lot easier, so I think that's a big improvement. And I'm going to thank staff, in particular our city attorney, for the time they've spent going through and vetting this and making sure that it's done as best as possible.
Thank you, Councilman Lamon. Vice Mayor Harvey?
All right, I don't have any questions or any changes. Obviously, I've put in a lot, but based upon some input that was received, I do have some, statements that, in looking at the stuff. So the first thing I'd like people to keep in mind is the purpose of the council meeting is to conduct the city's business. It's not a public forum, and sometimes people get confused with that. It is not a public forum for you, to state your views on things. The purpose is to conduct the city's business. The second thing is the Brown Act. It specifically authorizes the legislative body to adopt regulations to assist in the processing of comments from the public. The body may establish procedures for public comment as well as specifying reasonable time limitations on particular topics or individual speakers, so long as the body acts fairly with respect to the interest of the public and competing factors. It has great discretion in regulating the time manner, as distinguished from the content of the testimony by interested members of the public. So to put that another way, it's that you can have time limits on the speech as long as it's content neutral, meaning the amount of time has nothing to do with the subject that the person is bringing up. And that is the spirit of the Brown Act. So I wanted to make sure that people, knew that that's what we were trying to address in here, and I think it is. On public testimony with the Brown Act, it says every agenda for a regular meeting shall provide an opportunity for members of the public to directly address the legislative body on any item under the subject matter jurisdiction of the body. Again, I think we've done a really good job of addressing that. We allow this on our agenda under what we call citizens' business. We further have public comments on regular agenda action items, and we're kind of proposing even a third one for non-action items. So I think there's plenty of opportunity to get public testimony, and that was really the intent here. Then I did a whole lot of looking on ADA and the Brown Act. A lot of it's pretty vague, and yes, ADA needs to be followed. And in Section 4, Item 3, the rules, it just states what a person needs to do to request a modification or accommodation. It asks the city clerk to be contacted 48 hours prior to ensure that the proper accommodation can be made. Since there are many, many different types of disabilities, there's not just one type of accommodation. So, of course, the individual would need to say what they need, not explain their disability. This is just common in most cities, and some actually I noticed have really much longer. There were some in there that say you have to let them know 2 weeks in advance, which I think is a little crazy. So I don't think that's unreasonable to say what you need, and every effort made to try and accommodate whatever those needs are. Some can be met, and I think every effort should be made to do that. One of the other items that was mentioned is about including citizens' comments in the meeting packet. I agree that it's hard to provide comments prior to the publishing the agenda. Even we don't know until the agenda is published exactly what's going to be on that agenda. However, I have to remind folks that they are included as part of the meeting record. So any comments that people provide will be included as the record. There are typically two ways that the council receives these. They're either directly from a commenter or forwarded to the council by the city clerk. I've received comments from both of these methods all the way up until the meeting times, and in fact, sometimes we get copies of them, on the dais when we get here. So I think we get them, and I think it's just a matter of the way the process works, that of course they can't be included prior to the agenda being issued. But we do get them, we do look at them, we do, read them, and, oftentimes, they bring up good thoughts for us. The last thing that was really concerning me had to do with some comments made around the timeline of this policy. Personally, this has been in the works since 2011 when the subcommittee was done. It started with Janet Orchard and Richard Brunowski and Diane Thompson and I. And we were actually pretty close in 2012 to bringing this forward. But unfortunately, Janet decided not to do re-election, and therefore we kind of lost that member, and we had to get a new member when that came forward. Then we lost Rich because he retired, and Diane left. So basically, we kind of had to bring new folks up to speed and, start over. It's had some revisions. I think we've done really good work to get it where it is. Yes, we can make adjustments to it, and I think we should. The other thing that's been brought up occasionally by Mr. Barrich, I do think that if and when we do get this settled, I do think that we should periodically look at it again and see what's working and what's not working. In particular, since this is new, I think we should set a time, to kind of revisit it to see what worked and what didn't work. And so I appreciate that comment. So anyways, that's all I have to say for right now.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Harvey. I had a couple of things that I had questions about. I'd like to explore the time limit a little further with the council and kind of clarify that a little bit and see if we can come to consensus direction on that. I had a couple of items here I had highlighted in reading through this. And I don't know if the existing council had the same thoughts on that, but a couple of the items were on page 7 of 32. Oh, that was the time limit. On page 14 of 32, I can go back. There's some references here, and I think that they are there for efficiency's sake, but I don't know that they are in the best interest of openness and fairness and transparency. One of them is at the very top of page 42, subsection Roman numeral 5. Although all written communications will become part of the written meeting record, they will not be read into the record at the city council meetings. I don't know if that's so that we can try to maintain a certain time period, or that we don't want to open up that to elongated verbose dialogue. So I kind of had a concern on that. If I can be convinced that that's the appropriate way to go with that, I'm certainly open to listening to that. And it also kind of reiterates on number 4 down below that. The last two paragraphs, the council members' written comments shall be submitted to the city manager and city clerk and distributed as soon as possible to the other council members, but no later than the start of the meeting. And this is if council members not able to be there, and council members' comments will not be read into the record, but will become part of the written record. I don't know that everybody always has the wherewithal to consider the written record, where sometimes they may be in a position where the verbal is helps them. So that's something to consider, and I don't know, maybe something within the ADA or something like that. I mean, if you have members that might be listening to us via the live streaming and don't necessarily have access to the written record right there, it might be something to consider. So those were some of the thoughts I had on those. Go ahead, Mayor Harvey.
Okay, so on the written communications being part of the written record, so let's just talk about that for a minute. So let's say someone writes something, let's say they write a book. Are you suggesting that, someone who comes to the meeting and they have time, they get 3 minutes worth of time, yet someone who, sits at home and writes a novel, and that novel could take 30 minutes for you to read, that person's novel should be read publicly? I'm just trying to balance.
Yeah. My thoughts on that would be what a court would typically use in their expression of something along those lines is what a prudent and reasonable person might expect. So if somebody were to come up and have a 10-page written statement, you might indicate that is a little excessive at this point, but if it's a brief statement, or if we clarify that and said maybe a brief statement may be written into it, of no more than, 2 pages or something along those lines. I mean, that would cover most issues, I would think, unless it's really an extensive issue. And then that would not necessarily limit just to a written word. So that was my thinking. If you were to put some sort of, maybe not quite so strict on saying no written, but maybe a limited written statement may be read into the record, time permitting, or some sort of a little bit of wiggle room in there. It just seems to be a little bit restrictive, and maybe I'm just interpreting it that way.
I will add that it's fairly typical to take written communications as just part of the written record as opposed to a verbal description, for a couple of reasons that, and Robin may have more, but the ones that I typically run into is that you have, if you have people that submit, one example is, long statement, right? And then another issue is an issue of potential fairness. Some comments may be picked for verbal entering into the record and some may not. So it just gives everyone a level kind of playing field, so to speak, in terms of providing comments on items. And you also don't want to get into having to truncate or try to summarize someone's comments verbally if they've given you something in writing. And I think, in terms of meeting process, it provides a level playing field for everyone, and it provides a mechanism to enter their full comment verbatim as they've provided it into the meeting record, so it's there for eternity in its form that was submitted. And a lot of times these written comments include pictures and other stuff that the written description, there's a lot of different scenarios. And so just to make it uniform and fair for everyone, it just is submitted as part of the record and not verbally read typically. And the other thing I will just add is that if there's a exceptional circumstance where there's a need to vary from the rules for some reason, there's also a mechanism in the rules to be able to, as a council, vary from them if there's some exceptional circumstance that would require a deviation. And just as a way of background, I'll just also let you know that the rules that the subcommittee put together were really a combination of, so all the different cities in Sonoma County, they have, there's a lot of common threads through all the rules that the different cities have, and this is, the vast majority of this is just a common provision in everyone's rules, and the reasons why I stated is primarily why I think it's set up that way. That's my understanding. So that was a little bit longer than I intended it to be, but that's
I'm just
the
glad
background.
you didn't write it.
Yeah.
May I, Mayor?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree with what staff is recommending in this particular case. If there's a way to further communicate with the public, if there's an agenda item coming up that we know a lot of people are going to weigh in on, and if they don't have the ability to come to the meeting for whatever reason, if they were to, and I don't know if this is where you were going with this, but if they were to submit it by, I believe it's the Thursday before the Tuesday council meeting, then it is a part of the agenda packet, and everybody has the opportunity to see that. So, in other words, you know, we and the public have the ability to read that full letter, however many pages it is.
The problem with that is the agenda goes out, so the public doesn't really have time to get that before the agenda goes out. So yes, they can get the agenda on Thursday, and yes, then they can provide written comments, but it's not per se part of the packet that went out. It's part of the public record, not the packet that went out. It's a subtle difference there, but that's a reality.
Yeah, true.
You know, I will add just real briefly that a lot of the issues that tend to garner a lot of public comment can come up through the Planning Commission before they get to council. And so they have a long administrative record, including prior comments, by the time they get to the council for items that go through that sort of public process, which is, you know.
Well, Mr. Mayor, I was wondering, since the question seemed to be clearly the public and the council essentially gets the packet at the same time, and sometimes that reflex time for a member of the public to get something in is too short to be able to do that. And since we're talking, that seems unavoidable, but for the question of actually having comments that do come in later after that be part of the record or be part of that packet in the future, I wonder if there would be a problem. I'll be looking at our city attorney and looking at the people who worked on this, but there's no reason we couldn't have a section in the online packet that we saved that people could look up for comments received after that deadline. So if somebody looks back at something a week later, a month later, a year later, it's there, or even just before the meeting, depending on what the timeline would be, and I'm not going to make some things impossible for staff to do. But since most of the things we get nowadays, even if they're longer letters, they're already in a digital form, we have the technology to be able to do that. I wonder if that would solve the concerns you have and just give a better chance for people to make sure that their thoughts are represented, even if they're not able to make that deadline when a new item arises and there's not that reflex time to get a comment in early to be part of the packet. Would that do the job?
Potentially, if you had a council member that was not present and unavoidably or without a significant notice and wanted to make a comment regarding an item and wanted to have it read aloud, would that be precluded?
So the two different sections that we're talking about, that first one, section 1 under written communications, that applies to comments received to the council from the public or right. And then item number 4, the council member's comments would apply to the situation you're talking about, where you have an absent council member that wants to submit a letter on some issue that's coming before the council that they can't attend the meeting. And the way it's written right now is that just like public comments, they're not written they're not verbally entered into the record. They are provided as part of the written record.
Right.
Right. That's how it's written now.
Right. So there's mechanisms within the Rosenberg's rules that would allow us to deviate from that from time to time without necessarily having a violation of the protocol that we're trying to set up.
Suspend the rules.
Yeah, I mean, there's mechanisms within within these rules to deviate if the council feels that they need to for some specific circumstance.
So there really should be Rosenberg's guidelines.
Well, yeah. So Rosenberg's is really more focused on the parliamentary procedure, the types of motions, and how motions are made. Yeah. So this is just extra stuff.
Absolutely.
So can we, up until the time of the meeting, can we update the packet? Or is it a one-time only published packet and that's it, that's all she wrote?
So in terms of the actual council meeting itself, the important thing is that from a public process perspective, the important thing is that the council receives any comments submitted as well as it's available to the public at the meeting, so they can be considered for the actual meeting before the vote is cast or decisions made. In terms of the mechanics of how comments are forwarded, Typically what happens is if we have an item that's garnering an unusual number of public comments, in the past we have done like a supplemental packet. If you start getting a volume of comments where it really wouldn't be realistic to try to read through it right before the council meeting and the vote. So we've done that just as needed on some items historically. But as a matter of course, we don't typically, because the comments received usually aren't they're not typically that voluminous that they can't be considered as part of the meeting process.
I'm trying to tag on, because I gave this a lot of thought, and it is a difficult quandary that you want the comments, and I think the person that asked about this was really trying to make sure that others saw their comments too. So I think that the point is to get those out there so that others can also see them. And so I kind of like the thought of adding them to the electronic version, if possible, up until, kind of certain, I know at some point, we can't be sitting here at, 6:59 and have, the city clerks, adding stuff, but it seems like after the agenda is published, if there's comments that come in, it seems that it would be reasonable to add them to the online packet. I know the printed ones are already, there, but it just seems that
I think you're heading in the right direction. I wonder if I could see the concern. If you've got a packet, somebody's waving something at me in the audience. I can't see that well anymore. If you've got a packet, the last thing you want is one person downloads a packet one day and it says one thing, somebody downloads it the next day and it says something else. But what I was thinking of more is just a separate little subhead, communications received after packet publication, a separate PDF that combines all the comments that came in late, so they're there. They're available before the meeting, perhaps even, depending on the timeline. And that would be up to staff to decide how much time, because I'm not going to have them be working on that and answering that every hour when they have other things to do. And I would take direction and allow them the leeway to figure out how that works. But I think just a cursory attempt to do that would have some value, would satisfy the concerns I've heard from both of you, and I'd be fine with that. I think that would probably be helpful for everybody.
Okay, so in terms of the technology to do that, I'll have to look into it, but we can look into it.
Yeah, we have, if you click on our meetings, you'll come up with the meeting. There'll be you can download the packet, and it would just be one other uniform random locator, little address, one other URL that would say comments received afterwards. It is a little bit more work for staff, and I think that would have to be weighed carefully. And perhaps we can make it a trial period to see how this works, if it actually is that helpful in terms of getting better public comment and better exposure for people's thoughts, at the same time not unduly delaying the process of the other work that has to be done to make a meeting happen.
Yeah, so I mean, we'll look into the technology piece on how that could work. It would also, if we did something like that, it would have to tie into the rules too, because there would have to be some cutoff as to when that.
I would agree, and probably post it. How often we do it, I wouldn't expect somebody to demand that we check every hour and update this every hour. That would be not helpful at all. So, but just a general thought, if we could have that come back, I think that would be helpful.
Okay, and then I had a couple other issues that I thought needed addressing, in my opinion. On page 21 of 32, under correspondence, at the top of page 22, I should say, paragraph B. And this talks about matters of urgency when there is insufficient time for correspondence regarding state or federal legislation, et cetera. Second paragraph, this procedure is particularly appropriate if the city's position is similar or identical to a past city position on this matter and or is consistent with the position taken by the League of California Cities. I don't know that I always agree with past city council decisions and or the League of California Cities. And I know that you want to have some sort of a mechanism for responding in an urgent fashion, but if I don't agree with either one of those positions and we're taking it up as a body, I mean, we haven't had an opportunity to really discuss it as a body, I don't know that I'm really comfortable with that. I don't know if any of you fellow council members have that same concern.
We've run into this problem a lot, actually, at a lot of different venues. Well, it's not unusual. What usually happens is you have some sort of legislative platform. And the typical thing is you look for things of interest that are pre-agreeable. For example, with the League of California Cities, there'll be some items, yes, I would agree, we don't always pull in the same direction. That's natural with all groups. But if there's items that have to do with cities' financial well-being, replacement for redevelopment, perhaps, something most cities seem to agree on, financing for roads, the type of things that there's not a lot of argument here. That's generally what's applied, and usually there's a paragraph or two that just describes those basic things, and maybe if you have that, there'd be a greater comfort level. Because I agree, I don't always feel comfortable with the league, and maybe not every decision we make as a council historically, but I'm fine with this in terms of as a basic guideline for staff and a mayor to be able to respond when it's important for us to add our voice, to push for something. And if I believe if our mayor and our staff feel, no, this is a good thing for us to push for, to support, I'm willing to give the benefit of the doubt, and any of us can always complain very loudly afterwards if they make a mistake, too. So we still have that arrow in our quiver.
Yeah, we may be small potatoes compared to the state and the federal, but it just, to me, it didn't feel comfortable. Now, in this digital age, where we have the ability to communicate in a rapid manner,
Can't do it.
but you could through the city manager or the city attorney.
You've got to, essentially, if you're going to do something like this, you're going to have a meeting. So you'd be calling, as a mayor.
So you could call a special meeting if it's that urgent and discuss that item in public.
You could.
Now, I don't know how many items we have that are that urgent. I just don't, my concern is giving carte blanche on a situation where I may not agree with that at all, and we might have a council that doesn't agree on that as a body.
Well, that's why you have a mayor and you have a city manager that are assessing that. And the combination of both people representing the public and the people who do the work for the public, being there to do that, anything that's on the edge of being perhaps questionable, they're not going to proceed with that. You're going to be making that decision for us this year.
I have the utmost confidence in the existing council that we have. I don't know what councils will be like down the road. I have not had the most confidence in previous councils. So we don't really have to remove it at this point. If it really becomes an issue, we can always come back and address it. Some of these things struck me as a little
Well, since we've
broad.
asked staff to come back, and we're adding homework for you. I feel like you're in the honorary mayor program now, but perhaps a one or two paragraph legislative platform of the type of things that we will use.
Yeah, I mean, it's a,
Because they're usually very clear and non-controversial. I understand the concern, we've all weighed into it, but because of the limitations of the process, this is not a bad combination, and it works 99.9% of the time.
And I think I agree with Mark. Typically, the ones that are controversial, you want that discussion. You're not going to put your neck out there on something where you know that there are others that feel differently. You got to feel pretty good, putting your name on there that someone's not going to come back.
We've also had instances where an urgent item has come up from the league or from some other body, and they want a letter of support or not before our next council meeting, but not knowing how the whole council feels on it, we've had to decline submitting anything, which is also another option.
Remember that. Okay.
yeah, and I will say where it talks about what past positions the city's taken. I think I've normally seen it with the current composition of the council. If they've taken up that issue, or a majority of them have in recent history. I've never seen it come up where it was some position that was taken 10 years ago with totally different council members, and you wouldn't assume that those people would have the same position unless you've been part of a discussion as a council that would indicate that. And like they said, feel comfortable with it.
Okay. Conduct of city meetings. On page 24 of 32, first paragraph, fourth sentence. We strive to exercise compassion, benevolence, fairness, and optimism. Benevolence. Why is that in there?
This,
I mean, it's a nice word, but I don't see the relevance.
right. So this,
Because I can be compassionate, fair, and optimistic, but I don't know that being part of city government involves being benevolent. I could be wrong if you can convince me.
yeah, I mean, you know, it is, you know, definitely is, well, it's true that the council, you know, often has to come up against issues where there's divided opinion on the issue, right? And that's probably your point on the benevolence. And that particular, the wording in all these are the big picture guidelines that were in the ethics policy stage came over. There was no specific additions here in this
Okay.
guideline.
So to wordsmith that, do we need that in there?
I don't see it as a requirement, but I'd say what's wrong with it? We're not talking about the nuts and bolts of doing city government, I'd agree, but we're talking about just in general how we try to do our conduct. It makes sense to try and exercise compassion, benevolence, fairness, even optimism. That's a good way for us to try, and it says we strive. After all, we're all only human beings with enough provocation, which may or may not happen occasionally. We all sometimes fall short of that mark. But it's not a bad altruistic goal, so I don't see where it hurts anything. And I don't see anything wrong with the thought of trying to keep that in mind. In our private lives, sometimes dealing with things, maybe we're not benevolent, but when we step to this higher role, whatever it might be, in any other job, or for example, in our particular job, part-time job, being council members, not a bad thing to do.
Okay. And then the last item I had there was on the 10 o'clock for the time management, page 7.
No, all that's really saying is, you know, as Damien pointed out, let's take a, you know, a time check, because it says if you want to go past that, we'll have a vote on it. So it's really kind of, is everybody still?
So if you look like you're 20 minutes, you're going to run 10 or 15 minutes beyond that, you're going to stop right at that particular hour and take a vote to go, can we go another 10 minutes?
Yeah, I mean, so if, you know, if you're still in the midst of discussions at 10, the intent is that you just pause and say, is everyone?
It's also relating to, are there additional agenda? I think.
Yeah, right. I mean, you'd finish up the item you're in.
Additional
Yeah.
agenda
Right,
items.
it's new agenda items, so you kind of go, okay, so let's say you have 10 more agenda items. It's really taking a, you know, kind of a time check. Do we want to address those? Do we want to, you know, look at them and, you know, do some picking and choosing? You know, it's really, that's all it's meant to. Because after a certain number of hours, people do tend to get tired. Mm-hmm. The public can't be here all night either. They have lives too. So it's just really kind of a courtesy for everyone, that knowing that it gets to be at a certain time and people maybe aren't at their best. That's all.
Okay. Okay, do you need some direction on that?
So let me just run through them real quick and just make sure I got it. We're going to come back with some more information on ADA accommodation, just checking that to make sure that we're good there. There's a question raised about how we handle electronic email or electronic communications to council, and maybe calling that out specifically in the rules. And also looking into meeting comments received after the agenda's been published and how that might be handled on our electronic website, And then there's a couple other edits that seemed like there was consensus for on page 3 of 30. This is document 3 of 32. Under 2B, role of mayor, item 2, rather than having the council members choose, it'd just be the outgoing mayor. That would be the mayor pro tem for that meeting. And if anyone, you know, if we wanted to stop and talk about any of these, please let me know.
Well, and then the only thing on that would be if the vice mayor happened to be the mayor pro tem
Right.
Coincidentally, then it would just roll to the vote of the council.
It would, well, it would,
The existing vote. Of the Well, that's what you talked about initially. The mayor, the vice mayor, and then the remaining council members. So if the previous mayor, the mayor pro tem, happened to be the vice mayor at that time, and they weren't there, then it would automatically defer to the other four. So you need that fourth, yeah. So I just think you would clarify that.
clarify it.
I doubt it would occur, but you never know.
Yeah, right,
Anything's possible.
yeah.
Especially in
Okay.
Cotati.
We'll clarify that. And then, it sounds like on time management, this is page 7 of 32, on time management and adjournment, item I, that we're okay with 10 PM as a time. I guess if it comes up as an issue, we always can modify it in the future, the rules.
Okay.
Under, this is page 8 of 32, rules of conduct, item 3, B, rules of decorum. There was a suggested bullet that the presiding officer shall request the audience to withhold applause or noise when people speak, just for the benefit of everyone. And I have,
Not only applause, I think you can work with the words, but there's also been times where there's been booing and things like that. So I think it's really more general, let the situation,
right, as a courtesy to all the
courtesy.
speakers. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Could I suggest something along the line, withhold expressions of support or non-support in the interest of time management and encouraging the full expression of different views?
Or exuberant verbal outbursts.
I don't think I need to add that. But I think that covers it, because you're correct, too. It can work the other way as
Yeah.
well. And what we really want is somebody to be able to get up and say what they want to say and need to say without being pressured or interrupted or harassed in any
Or
way.
feeling
regardless.
threatened or intimidated.
Exactly.
Right.
Okay. And then on page 14 of 32, on item 5, speaker cards, there was the way it's currently written, it provides discretion to the presiding officer on how they want to handle speaker cards in terms of the order and how they're how the public comment's managed. There was a suggestion that potentially a blank card could be used, for the non-speaker card people. And I think we have a couple options. We could write that in there, or we could leave it up to the discretion of the presiding officer just to manage that. Yeah.
Having made the suggestions, I think that would be fine, as long as, I think it goes with our general code of ethics to try and strive to make sure everybody has a full and equal opportunity as possible to have the opportunity to speak. That'd be fine with me.
I'm okay with that.
Okay. And then on page 15 of 32, item 6, council interaction with public, just without interrupting, sorry, this is the sentence that reads, in part, the council member may ask city manager or city attorney briefly to correct or otherwise clarify the matter, or the council member may provide a brief, direct response at that time. And then the addition would be without interrupting the speaker.
I needed a little clarification on that. If you have somebody speaking and they come to the end of their 3 minutes, I think you do have the opportunity to provide a brief, direct response. Were you thinking that waiting till a particular time period was up for that speaker, or?
Yes. What I'm really trying to say there is that council will not interrupt whoever's speaking at the podium. When their time is up, if they have a follow-up question, which is kind of the protocol that we've been using, but not 100%. So I would suggest putting that in there so council is directed here to not interrupt a speaker until they're done. If there's a misstatement or a question that needs to go to staff when that speaker's done, that's fine. So that's why I just wanted to add that without interrupting the speaker.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. So page 17 of 32, this is Under item C, public discussion at hearings. Number 2, council questions of speakers. There's a sentence midway through the paragraph that says interaction with the speaker will be limited to a question or questions for clarification rather than ongoing dialogue. So that's all right. And then I think that is it. And I would want to add, too, that so the recommendation, based on some of the stuff we've discussed tonight, the recommendation for this item is introducing the ordinance, which I think is still okay. There's also a recommendation to adopt the resolution, which would adopt the rules. And I would suggest that we just continue that, and they'll both end up on the consent calendar next meeting with these changes we've discussed in a red line format. And so the council, if you can pull it if you want at that time. If there's any further questions, otherwise it would just be we'd move forward as we've discussed tonight.
Okay, I did see some hands in the audience that wanted to make some comments, so I am going to reopen it briefly for public comment. So, Ms. Alderman.
I have been trying to make this point for a half hour, so this is how much you value our input. Wednesday is the citizens' deadline for the meeting packet online. Friday is when the agenda comes out. If this isn't indicative of how it's going to be from now, I give up.
Thank you. Mr. Barrich.
Thank you, sir. It was very gracious of you to open it back up. I'm going to try to be brief and try to keep it under a minute, sir. I want to say that the council has always had the prerogative and the right to call a citizen back up from the audience for clarification. It's never been used as far as I've seen. I've done it a few times I did it a few times when I was on the council. But remember, you have that right, and you should take advantage of that. Rather than talking down to people and trying to get the last word, I think it'd be very professional of you to ask people to come back up and expect them to be polite and make your point. And if you have any questions, the citizen can answer. Also, when I was on the council, there were no letters or complaints that were put into the packet. That was a big beef of mine. Letters that came into the city manager's office and to Diane's office, I wanted to see them, but we were prohibited from that. I would like for you to see those correspondences and the complaints, and they should be in the packet so the press can look at them and the public can look at them. And also, I'm very disturbed that I was not invited to any of these subcommittee meetings, and I applaud the subcommittee. This was a lot of work. I give you credit for that. But the fact is, when somebody has come up here for 2 years and could have helped, not been disruptive, but could have helped in the process, we wouldn't have seen half of these mistakes and these errors had you had a couple people in the public who were willing to help you with this. So keep that in mind going forward. I mean, I don't know what else I could have done to try to be helpful. And come 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock at night, as you've already discussed, you all have the right or duty to make a suggestion or a motion that maybe you'd like to adjourn the meeting to a future time and date certain in the future. And if there's a second, and you can discuss it. You can assess how you're feeling, how the audience is feeling. And I don't remember a council meeting ever being adjourned to another date or time certain. We've had meetings go on here till 1 o'clock in the morning and so forth, where I thought that maybe we should have adjourned it to the Thursday night or the next Monday night. So please keep that in mind. You have that ability and the right to do that.
Thank you. Anyone else want to speak on that before I close public comment? Seeing none, I will close public comment on that. And now we have direction on that, correct? You want me to bring that back? Okay.
Correct.
Can I?
Absolutely.
Okay. So I guess it's unfortunate that Ms. Alderman had to leave the room for a little bit, but your concern about the Wednesday comments and the Friday comments was brought up, and it is unfortunate. It's the way it works, and so part of what our discussion was around how do we resolve that, and that was that discussion around how do we incorporate those, how do we include that. So I do, want to make sure that you understand that we did hear it, and we have, I think, come up with a way to resolve that.
Ms. Alderman, she's made a comment. We haven't opened it back up for public comment. Thank you very much. So I'm going to recess for a 5-minute bio break, and then we'll come back and address the rest of the agenda. 5 minutes. Well, we can always close down at 10. Thank you for your patience. We will now reconvene the meeting at 9:21 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time. Before we move on to the next agenda item, I think we have to go back and have a motion regarding that previous item. If anyone would like to try to take a stab at that with maybe some direction from the city manager.
If I just clarify, is that a motion just on the introduction of an ordinance, not on the resolution?
I think it's a couple motions. It's introduction of the ordinance and continuing the resolution and the accompanying rules document amended as discussed tonight. So, direction. Well, yeah. Well, yeah. We're introducing the ordinance and continuing the resolution, right, with direction.
I hope I haven't made things worse. I think what you need is a motion introducing the ordinance, and then I think what you've done is you've given direction to the city manager to bring the resolution back with the changes that you've talked about tonight. So you don't need a formal motion for that, although you're welcome to pass one if you wish. But you do need a motion on the ordinance.
How about we take one thing at a time? I move to introduce an ordinance modifying the parliamentary procedure from Robert's Rules of Order to Rosenberg's Rules of Order, and rescission of the resolution, I'm making sure we need this, setting the city council regular meeting date and time.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. 1 second, sorry.
Just didn't come out right.
Yeah. Just go ahead and a motion just to introduce the ordinance.
Yeah, the second part really wasn't necessary as I was reading it.
Yeah, the rescission of the prior
Right.
prior resolution really is taken care of with the new resolution that you'll look at next meeting.
I have a lot of things crossed out on this motion. That's why I was trying to figure out what to say. I'd like to reintroduce my motion, and it's to move to introduce the ordinance modifying the parliamentary procedure from Robert's Rules of Order to Rosenberg's Rules of Order.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And I think we'll leave it at that. We have the direction on
You've already got direction on the resolution, right?
Are you directed?
Okay. So now we will move to the regular agenda, number 5, reaffirmation and confirmation of existing medical marijuana regulations. And with that, we'll go to Community Development Director, Ms. Parker.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, council members. This is one of those multidisciplinary topics, so Chief Parrish is here with me as well for questions. Just as a brief background on the history of medical marijuana in the state, and very brief as it relates only to tonight's action. In 1996, California voters adopted the Compassionate Use Act as a ballot initiative, which has since been codified in the Health and Safety Code. The Compassionate Use Act provided limited defense for physicians, qualified patients, and primary caregivers, a limited defense to those individuals from prosecution for cultivation and possession of marijuana. In 2003, the state legislature adopted the medical marijuana program, which is also now codified, of course, in the Health and Safety Code, but it provides qualified persons, primary caregivers, and holders of ID cards a defense to certain identified marijuana-related state crimes. In the California courts, since adoption of those two large changes to the state rules and laws. Several court cases have tested those acts, and the California courts have found that neither of those two acts provide medical marijuana patients with an unfettered right to obtain, cultivate, or dispense marijuana. In 2013, both the California Supreme Court and the Third District Court of Appeals have found that neither of the acts preempt local land use authority when it comes to the regulation of medical marijuana. And local jurisdictions do have the ability to prohibit cultivation completely if they choose to. Now, in 2015, a series of bills have been proposed, and those were, three of those were signed into law by Governor Brown in October. And those they're collectively known as the Medical Marijuana Regulation and Safety Act. And those are, as I mentioned, made up of three bills. AB 266 established the Bureau of Medical Marijuana within the Department of Consumer Affairs, and that regulates the distribution, dispensing, and transport of medical marijuana, and set up a dual licensing structure, which requires both state and local licenses or permits to establish medical marijuana businesses. AB 643 established criteria for licensing of medical marijuana businesses, regulating physicians and recognizing local authority to levy taxes and fees for medical marijuana businesses. And AB 243, the third, established or designated the Department of Food and Agriculture as the licensee for cultivation of medical marijuana. And that bill included a provision stating that cities which do not have an ordinance regulating or prohibiting cultivation in place by March 1st, 2016, will lose their authority to regulate or ban cultivation within the city limits, making the state the sole licensing authority. So the important thing for the motion tonight, or the action tonight, is that this third series of regulations also do not trump local land use authority. They allow for this dual licensing that I mentioned. However, the League of California Cities has recommended that local agencies affirm or reaffirm their existing regulations. One reason for that is that many land use codes or zoning codes are set up on the premise of permissive zoning, which means that if a use is not expressly listed as allowable, then it's prohibited. Some zoning codes are explicit. Some codes like ours are explicit that that's how it operates, and other codes, usually the older ones, are not as explicit about that. And often it's the way they've been implemented over years, but they're not explicit about it. So I think that's the reason that the League of California Cities, or one of the reasons that they're recommending that jurisdictions confirm or reaffirm their existing regulations prior to this March 1st, 2016 date, so that everybody's clear on what the local agencies allow. And so that's the reason that we're here tonight, is to affirm what we've got in terms of regulations on medical marijuana, especially cultivation, here in the city, so that we can meet that March 1st, 2016 deadline. I will, as just a reminder, in 2007, the Cotati City Council did adopt regulations which allow a single medical marijuana dispensary here in the city, and that's been operating successfully. I think most people will agree. Those regulations reside as Chapter 8.24 of the Municipal Code, and it allows for the operation of a single dispensary in either the commercial Gravenstein corridor or the commercial East Cotati corridor, both of those zones. And with that ordinance, the supply of marijuana product that's allowed on hand at any one time is 30 pounds of dried marijuana and 600 immature plants, and cultivation is expressly prohibited in that ordinance. So It may be that the council would wish to revisit those regulations, and that may be appropriate in light of this most recent law, the 2015 law, or with things that may come forward in the next year or so regarding marijuana in the state, at the state level. So if the council wants to do that or wants to entertain that, the action tonight won't prevent that from happening. This is to reaffirm what's existing, and the council can ask through strategic planning process or any other point in time for staff to open up a public process to look and see if our regulations still meet the desires of the community. So the action tonight, the staff recommendation is that the council adopt the resolution reaffirming the existing regulations, which do include a prohibition on marijuana cultivation. And the resolution that's before you tonight has all of the requirements contained within it that have been advised by the League of California Cities to include. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Carr? I do have a question. In the October 2015 AB 266, establishment of a dual licensing structure, if a city does not allow cultivation, then after a certain point, the state is going to supersede and it will not be allowed to, not be able to allow cultivation? Is that correct?
No, if the city prohibits cultivation, that will stand, and the state will not be allowed to issue a license where the local jurisdiction prohibits it. If the local jurisdiction allows it, then the state license would follow the parameters that were established. So they would also issue a license or a permit, but it would follow the parameters that were adopted by the local agency. There are in total, I think, 16 or 17 different license types. Half a dozen of those are different levels of cultivation, and the others deal with distribution and manufacturing and transport. So there's a variety of different types of licenses someone might want to get, and that's what we may want to look into in the future, is what, if any, of those licenses might be appropriate.
Okay, so down the road, if we wanted to revisit that, we could potentially look at the existing state law and adopt any of those particular provisions that
Yes.
would apply to that. Okay, so
Yes.
it wouldn't preclude us from doing that down the road.
Right. We may choose to amend our local regulations at any time. There's no deadline that the state has for us to amend ours.
Okay. Well, and one of the reasons I ask that is because in a neighborhood dear to Councilman Delasso's and my home is a evident, obvious cultivation going on. And when I did some reading on this and talked about, understood that we didn't allow for cultivation, I thought, well, why are we allowing this particular cultivation? And then it goes into issues regarding the district attorney and if that's something that they want to prosecute and things like that. So that's where I had a little bit of confusion on there. So if there's no further questions on this, I can open this up to the public. And if anyone would like to address this, please.
Good afternoon or good evening, Council. My purpose of coming here is just to introduce myself to those of you that don't know me. I'm Brandon Levine. I am the Director of Mercy Wellness, local dispensary here in Cotati. I'd like to propose that, we do move forward with this ordinance. I'm here to help you guys in any way I can. We actually have a lot of people on our team that have been doing a lot of diligent work to collect all the information needed to be able to give to you guys. So feel free to ask me any questions. I'm going to give you some contact information, and we're here to help you guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Brandon. Anyone else wishing to address this? Mr. Birich?
Thank you, Mr. Moore. I remember when this issue, the first ordinance came up in 2007. It was very interesting. The city attorney gave a wonderful dissertation on marijuana law, marijuana history, and so forth. Mr. Jeffries, our city attorney at the time, I believe, when it first came up. Police Chief Stewart came before the council, and he was adamantly against this, and he gave a lot of reasons why. And I think he was heartfelt or had his heart in the right place. But what we found out over the years is none of his fears materialized. None of his predictions of negative impacts to the city really materialized, and that's good for Cotati. This has been a success, and I live within 1,000 feet of Mercy Wellness, and I can say, in my view, they've been good neighbors, good business people, and I think we're proud to have them, so I would support the council's ordinance tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to address this topic? Seeing none, I will close public comment on it. Bring it back to the council for discussion. Any further discussion? Councilman Lyman.
Well, as suggested by our community development director, I would like to suggest, I think it's obvious we're in the middle of a lot of changes with this particular issue and with the issue that arose through the state legislation, the timeline. This is the best course of action. I will be supportive of it tonight, but I would like to see this come back with some direction perhaps for potential land use code amendments that might fit Cotati to cover issues like private cultivation of medical marijuana, as well as what would be appropriate commercial cultivation perhaps when that time comes. I think it would be good to look at this, one, to answer questions about the things you raised, and I was thinking too about the legitimate concern about commercial cultivation in residential areas. I think that's a fair concern, and also just to position us to be ready for changes that are coming our way. Like it or not, change is coming, so we have to learn to make this work the best way for our citizens. So I would like to see this come back with looking at those issues and seeing what would be the best practice for us.
For clarification, Councilman Lyman, you're suggesting that the issue regarding cultivation come back down the road, not necessarily this particular resolution?
Not this particular resolution, but I think in terms of actually having a more fully amended, appropriate legal structure for dealing with this, yeah. And those seem to be the key areas that no city, including us, really had time. This is why the recommendation came from the League of Cities, just to reaffirm what you have or to have a straight-out ban, was because there was no time to really vet this vastly, quickly changing landscape and come up with what might be the best rules, given I can see our attorney just nodding her head, thinking of all the different directions, federal, state, local. So I think given staff a little time, I would like to see it come back just to answer those questions. And my priority, there may be others that need to come forward, but I would like to see the questions of both personal cultivation and then commercial, how that the best practice to do that so we can avoid some of the issues we have now.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Harvey? No comments. I'm of the same school as Councilman Lamon. When you traverse that particular neighborhood and you smell the amount of medical marijuana growing, I just feel so sorry for all of those ill people in that home. They must be tragically ill. So with that in mind, I'm looking for a motion.
I move to adopt a resolution reaffirming and confirming the city's existing medical marijuana regulations.
And I will second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Let the record show that's a 4-0 vote with one absence.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Parker. And our next regular agenda item number 6, Mayor's and Councilmen's general membership issues for consideration in 2016.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. So at the most recent Mayor's and council members meeting, it had come up as a suggestion that the mayors and council members as a group potentially look into issues of regional significance and see if there's some commonality there among the cities that the group wants to take up and do potentially even up to a position, like a position letter on it. But I think the way it was, the request was put out was really, at this point, just preliminary, since this doesn't exist currently. And they were just, the mayors and council members group was just looking to all the individual cities to provide thoughts or ideas on things that the group can discuss, and then through some process that's not yet defined right now, select some issues, presumably where there's commonality among the cities, to explore them. Although it hasn't been defined yet, I imagine it can run the gamut from taking the list of issues that various cities submit to the mayors and council members group and narrowing that down to a list where there's some consensus on, we all think that these are issues that we should talk about. And then that could be merely a informational item where the group wants to have presentations come in, people that are experts in those areas come in and just talk about it for everyone's mutual education. That's one end of the spectrum, potentially. Or it could be all the way to them issuing a joint letter from the group. And on that end of the spectrum, I would imagine, it would require each voting member from that group to come back to the respective councils and get a position, and then go back to the mayors and council members group to be able to issue a joint opinion or position letter. And something like that, one more thing I'll add, and then there's also, there is a kind of analogy to this type of arrangement for Marin County, for example. And in Marin County, it's a little bit different in that they do like a joint position, or they can do joint positions, but what they have frequently done is they form subcommittees and issue white papers that are available to the member jurisdictions on specific issues. So there might be an issue of common interest. They go away into a couple people are selected as a subcommittee group. They go away, they create a white paper on it, and they provide it to all the members, and the members can take it back to their home jurisdictions and do something with it or not. It's really up to the jurisdiction on how they want to handle that. And if in one scenario, if this were to move forward into issuing a joint position letter, I guess the potential value of that is that there's a sort of a regional position on some issue. There's some issues that the county's grappling with that maybe the cities want to get ahead of and not wait for it to come individually to the cities. That's another possibility. Or there's issues of regional significance where, as a group, they potentially would want to put a position out, and that could be leveraged for looking for funding or, bugging legislators when they run across them in their various daily functions on issues that are deemed regionally significant. And in the packet, there's a couple letters from some cities that have already created this letter. And just real briefly, some of the issues that have been raised. This is by Windsor and Healdsburg, the letters that are in the packet. Affordable housing, the medical marijuana issue, post-redevelopment financing, infrastructure financing, more generally speaking, waste management, composting, transportation funding, so road funding, and homelessness, which is, I suppose, different than affordable housing in terms of degree of housing. So some other things I was just that are out there as regional issues, I'll just throw out there for your all consideration. Of course, for affordable housing, and in terms of infrastructure funding, I think something that's going to be on the horizon in the next couple of years, maybe not this year, but in the next couple of years for sure, is transportation funding generally. The state is working on, road funding, as I think everyone knows. The league is following that fairly closely. Measure M is is in the next several years going to be looking at what's the post-Measure M. Is there anything that we're going to be doing as a region in terms of completing, freeway improvements or other local road projects as a region that we want to tackle? And in the category of transportation funding, there's also SMART, of course, that is building the rail system, and they're to the airport, but they have to get up to Cloverdale. So that could be in the mix on how that would happen, aside from Measure Q that they use to fund themselves. And Measure M also partially funds SMART as well. There's also, as Councilmember Lamon brought forward, the extended producer liability issue, which may be well in hand, but there might be some value there for pharmaceuticals. Universal preschool is something the county is working on as an issue, and there's also the library issue that came before the voters last election, but it's still out there. So anyway, just some additional thoughts as to things that may be of value to pick up as a group and see if there's anything there to collaborate on. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Councilmember Deloso.
Microphone's already on. So we have 5 meetings a year with mayors and council members. So we have about 20 topics to cover. This is great. I would be interested in, this is just the list I came up with, the discussion going on, I believe, at the state level, the medical marijuana excise tax. The state of California has an 8% tax on that. And I think we need to get the medical marijuana industry involved in the discussion, but Washington State is a 32% tax, Colorado's 35%, and I think there's been discussion at the state level in California of raising the 8% up to 15%. California agriculture last year or 2 years ago, I don't know if these might be 2014 figures, if you count all the cows and all the almonds, okay, so we're talking different types of things that are grown and produced, was $42 billion. Medical marijuana was just under $40 billion. So something to think about at a regional level. I think affordable housing is a great discussion, and I think if there's any hope of limited capacity redevelopment funds ever coming back to the state, and maybe if the focus was very clear from the get-go that money's coming back, but it has to be used on, and there could be a short pick list, but I think affordable housing would be ideal. Transportation funding is always a big deal as well, and the homelessness issue, which we brought up for a future agenda item, and I just think, we need to be doing something about this and not just talking about we should do something about it, but actually doing something about it, and from a countywide level. So each jurisdiction should have some capacity to do something. That's my list.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Harvey.
I like that list, although I would also like to add the universal preschool, because I think that, the children are our future, and we sort of need to start them early on and do something to get them going so that we can do a lot of the other things, so that they then do well in school, and then they do well at work, and so on and so forth. So,
Councilman Lamon.
Actually, rather than questions for staff, I would like to discuss this, and I do have some thoughts on this because I see some issues, but I'd like to wait till after the public comment, I think, to get into this. But I definitely have some concerns, just real briefly. I think we're reinventing the wheel. 99% of what we're talking about you already have, and we already do through the mayors and council members legislative committee. But we can get into that more. But I just wanted to hold our thoughts so we can actually discuss that, because that does seem to impact where this might go. But I'd prefer to wait till after public comment and then get into it a little deeper.
Thank you. I don't have any questions at this point, so at this point I would be more than happy to open it up to public comment. If anyone would like to address this, seeing none, I will close public comment. Thank you. My thinking when this was first presented at the mayors and councilmen's was that if there were some issues that were more countywide, that we had a passion regarding that we might get together as cities and show our support if we had the direction from the councils and then present that forward as a unified body to the county. I don't know that the legislative committee works on that, or if that's more on issues that are regional and maybe statewide.
Well, first of all, did you want me to speak to that?
Absolutely.
Okay. We have the ability to do all that, and of course, at any time, none of us are, in any body we serve, to stop from doing that. City Manager did give the example of the drug back thing that we brought to the cities individually through the RWA, which, by the way, did get unanimous support from every city in the county, which surprised me. It's hard to get unanimity on almost anything. But I guess my concern about this, number one, we have tried to do some things together through the Mayors and Council Members Association. As my colleague said, 5 meetings a year. It's a very, very slow process to bring something up, to have it vetted by staff, to bring it back. You're looking probably 3 or 4 months, right? Probably 4 months, right? To meet 2 months, a month every 2 a meeting every 2 months. There's 4 months right there just to get it to the talking point. It's going to be hard to do anything with a process like that. So that's a concern. Secondly, as I mentioned earlier, as I look at the letters from our colleagues in Healdsburg and Windsor, good comments, things we have been working on actually, but almost all of these, not all of them, but almost all of them are things that not only are the province really legislative things that we're working on, but things we have been working on. Going to Sacramento to talk about transportation funding is something that we've done, something we do on a regular basis, lobbying our officials, Sacramento, trying to put everything together to make the best of that. So I think my concern is reinventing the wheel. And so what I would say, if we send a letter forward, what I'd like it to at least ask is that there's no duplication of issues already covered by our legislative committee, because that would be pointless. On the other hand, there are some things that perhaps universal preschool might be worth talking about. It struck me that, like you said, Mr. Mayor, issues perhaps if we could find a large group of cities that agree on some issues and we all pull in a certain direction, maybe that moves the county in that direction. Things like minimum wage. That's something I had thought might be within the realm of possibility depending on where people are at and what's possible. But in terms of just generally using it for the large list we heard, I don't see that as viable. So I'm fine with sending a letter with some suggestions, but I would very much like it to point out that most of what's being proposed is already covered by Leg Committee with all your representatives sitting on it. And if you want to expand that to handle an even wider range, it's ready to do that.
A question on that, if I could. So having been to just a couple of the Leg Committee groups meetings, and I know there's a regular report out by the Leg Committee at mayors and council members. So, but when Katati was chair 2 years ago of mayors and council members, I think we had, if I remember right, there was one issue that was brought to us, and so that was brought to the executive committee of mayors and council members, and then brought out to the whole group. I'm pretty sure it was unanimous, and there was a letter sent, and that's a powerful letter. You know, that's a letter that's coming from every city in the county to wherever it's going to, it doesn't matter. And I think that's a pretty powerful statement to make. So I think you're right. I think it shouldn't be, I hate this word, duplicative. Don't know if it's the right one. But it shouldn't be a redundant effort. Just can't talk tonight, it's late. So I totally agree. And I think it has to be made clear that, and maybe in our letter from the mayor or from city manager could state that, you know, there's a lot of work that's being done by the legislative committee group, and let's make sure that, you know, we're not necessarily stepping on toes, but that there's some coordination going on there. And if the timing's right, that's fine. The two can move forward.
Actually, you bring up a very good point, if I might, Mr. Mayor. Sure. That was one of the rare instances in the times I've been in the legislative committee where usually we come to a consensus. If we don't come to a consensus, we try to make sure that everybody is agreeable to what we're doing. Since we're representing all our cities and we're speaking with a voice for this whole county, we want to make sure that all our councils and our constituents, we believe, are supportive of that. And for the most part, we do that. People have the right, if somebody doesn't like something, they can say no. And then the process is to take it to mayors and council members. We try to avoid that because that's long, slow, and as you remember, it was a laborious process. And that was the only time we actually had somebody say, pull a no vote. So I would suggest that, again, the process we already have in place. The Mayors and Council Members Association is the court of last resort. If something can't be resolved in the Legislative Committee, we do have the ability to take it to the full group and push it forward, which we did that time and we did successfully. But if we actually did everything we do at Ledge through Mayors and Council Members Association, we wouldn't be responding during the legislative year, that's for darn sure. Right. We'd be a couple of years behind probably. So I think it's well-intentioned. I just don't see it as completely workable. So, yeah, I would say if we're going to say no duplication and we're going to say use it for issues that can't be resolved at Ledge, I fully support that, and we already have that, so I'd be happy to support it.
So if I understand you correctly, if there's an issue that's brought before the Legislative Committee and there's not an agreement there, then you might bring that to the mayors and councils to see if you can get some sort of an agreement?
Yeah, let's say, for example, that the city of Cloverdale brings something and the city of Cotati says, no, we feel we don't like it. Well, they have the right, if they feel, and other people who have voted with them, they want to bring it to the full board, the full group of the Mayors and Council Members Association, you can do that. And like I said, it's rarely done. Usually it isn't necessary, but that is there. It has been there, and I think it's a good option. And maybe for things that fall outside that we can't come to agreement in, that's the perfect use for the association, because it is not an ideal way to do this. It's a very cumbersome tool to do the type of things we're talking about doing.
Thank you.
So, excuse me, if I can understand this correctly, it seems like, in the vein of not reinventing the wheel, that any list of items that we arrive at would just be going to for the consideration of the Ledge Committee, and if they can't agree on something, then it would just go to the full body like it does now, right? There's
no.
Is that right?
I don't understand it that way.
Well, I think certainly, I don't see, if cities want to, at a point now, write a letter with suggestions, that's fine. But most of the things that are being suggested are things that are already being worked on. Perhaps we're not reporting out clearly enough, and I might be somewhat responsible for that, too, because I report out on a lot of things. I don't know how much we've covered at Ledge, though. But generally speaking, I think I was just saying not duplicating it and using it only when there's issues that can't be resolved by Legislative Committee. And if something does come up that people want to work on, for example, like the drug take-back thing, or potentially universal preschool, if there's not something regional, if there's not something statewide that's working and there's a possibility for something regional, and if there's interested people, there's no reason you can't use that process. There are a few things that might fall outside using the Legislative Committee, but most of what's being suggested just doesn't seem to.
But Ms. Mayor,
So you bring up a good point about that a lot of these are discussed at the Ledge Committee, and you also bring up a good point about reporting out on it. And I think that part of the problem ends up being is all the reports, sort of like here, it's kind of, give us just the prudent parts in 10 seconds or less and don't, and maybe what we need to do on regional issues is that mayors and council members have a more in-depth discussion on the issue so that everyone knows that you're working on it, knows what the issues are about the issue and what kind of the options are, because I don't think that a lot of us do get that. And maybe that's, why this came about and the breakdown. I'm just
I think
throwing
that's
that out
actually
there.
a great suggestion, and I know, remembering when we've scheduled this, it's often difficult to schedule these, maybe once, maybe twice, and certainly once a year during key legislative times. It might be worth scheduling a meeting where we have Nancy Paul Bennett have a round table to go over what's going on and have a nice back and forth with everybody, not just the usual representatives, so you can get a fuller idea of not only that you get the problems, you know the things we're working on, it's the typical type of things, but where we're at, what's going on, what's going well, what isn't going well, and what we're concerned about. So, yeah, I think that's a great suggestion, and I would include that as part of this.
Councilman Blanton.
The only, Councilmember Landman, I just want to know, would you be opposed to a letter going to Mayor Glass from the city with the comprehensive list, but just kind of noting, Ledge Committee and this group need to, just to make sure they're working more closely hand in hand. But would you?
Yeah, no, I
propose to
wouldn't be
them?
opposed to sending a letter. All I would ask is it says very clearly we request no duplication of issues already covered by the legislative
Yeah,
committee.
okay.
And that anything that can't be resolved by the legislative committee can then go up to the Mayors and Council Members Association. With that, no, I had no intention of.
Yeah, and I think, Vice Mayor Harvey is spot on, and I don't want to belabor the point, but I think there's a lot of people in the larger mayors and council members group, that don't know about Ledge Committee. There's not always full participation by all the cities at those meetings. That's problematic. And I think from an educational standpoint, the larger list topics, I think would be important to have, one of those presentations at mayors and council members, because you have a much larger audience there of cities participating in that meeting. So I think that was really more of the gist of why we wanted to do that. I'm not sure if that's where it's going, but that's why I'd say, a fuller list, obviously you can't accomplish all these things.
Well, I think this is a good point. It's kind of like great minds think alike. And I think maybe this came from Mayor Belforte, I believe, in Roanoke Park, who hadn't previously. She's on Ledge now, so maybe that will help resolve this. But because we have tried in the last couple of years now, quick history here, Legislative Committee essentially came about from the League of California Cities, who often we share concerns, although, as the Mayor ably puts, not always. And as a result, it's been focused largely on League issues in the past. And what I've tried in the last couple of years is, while respecting that and working with that and making sure that the issues we can care about, we work out, that I reach out to other constituencies, whether it's LAFCO, Sonoma Clean Power, staff in all our cities, about what are our concerns, what's coming up, what do we need to worry about. That's what we've tried to do to leverage this into something bigger. And there's no reason that city councils can't, as a rule, find things that they want to direct and send through there, too. It could be exercised more fully, I think, and that's what's really in the process of happening the last few years. So I support the concept. I think that might be a better direction of doing it, and I agree, a letter, and I think you've heard it enough times to have a good guess of what it sounds like. I think that would be fine.
Thank you. The Legislative Committee is part of the League of California Cities, which is a separate entity other than the mayors and councils.
Well, actually, it's the mayors and council members, legislative committee, but the executive officer is essentially a League of California Cities person. So they fund that position to allow us to do this. So it is our Sonoma County mayors and council members legislative committee, but that executive officer comes from the League. Because in the past, most in the League has encouraged this because they have a lot of legislative issues they want to push to protect cities, so they want to organize us and have us put our voices together to work for those things. So that's how we got there.
But in essence, you could have members of the mayors and councils collectively have a position that doesn't necessarily jive with what the...
And what happens is essentially the chair drafts the letter instead of our executive officer. And we've done that a couple times this year, and that's part of the evolution, you will, that I've been trying to see happen, that it can cover a wider base than just being only reflexive to League of City issues.
Would you feel that if there was an issue that was strong enough and supported by all the cities involved, and they were presenting that issue to the county, that it would have more weight or more bearing if it came from the mayors and councils in this format as well as the legislative committee?
I don't think it would. I think you'd kind of essentially have a duplication. The bottom line is you've already have something that's a legislative committee to speak on legislative issues that represents the Mayors and Council Members Association, all the cities in this county. And it's essentially... But not the county, exactly, yes. Yeah, good point to make. And because sometimes we may want to work with the county on legislative issues, and there's no reason it can't be used for that.
Okay, so I think it sounds as if the direction might be if we can select some topics that we would be prepared to send a letter to in support of this that would not be redundant and being concurrently worked on with the legislative committee. Would that be?
I think that'd be good.
Okay. I wouldn't have a problem with that. I would be supportive of that. Coming up with the issues that we think are important to our constituents might be interesting.
And given unanimity, yes.
So right now, we've got concerns on preschool education, universal preschool education. As Damien brought up, issues regarding the library and the continued support and funding of the library in light of the fact that that last tax measure was increased, didn't pass. Do you think that you're talking about the taxation on medical marijuana and things like that? Is that, yes, is that something that we would want to?
You know, I think...
raise a few eyebrows.
Yeah, just cutting to the chase, I mean, I think that's a statewide issue, right? And so that's going to be brought up at the state level. But if there's a groundswell of support coming from the counties, because, you know, you'd have to come up with a formula. I'm not going to sit here and do it, but there'd have to be some kind of a breakdown between the city of origin and the county of origin and the state. But there's... You heard the dollar figures. Those, I didn't make those up. I looked them up, so they're pretty significant.
Okay. So that would be a potential issue that we could include on that list. There's an issue that I think would affect many of these issues, albeit indirectly, and it was something that I mentioned last year as a potential future agenda item, and that was living wage. So we know that the county's at a standstill right now with some of their negotiations and some of their employees. And if there's, maybe if there's not enough broad enough support to encourage the county, then, it's not something that we would take up. So I don't know if there's any other suggestions you would want to add in there? We have 4 or 5 right now?
Well, yeah, I mean, we don't need to make a humongous list.
No.
Yeah, what I've heard so far is the medical marijuana excise tax, affordable housing, the possibility of some tax increment funding potentially. I know the legislature is always trying to work on some formula, some post-redevelopment kind of formula, but that's an issue potentially. Transportation funding, broadly speaking, right? Homeless, universal preschool, and living wage.
Sounds like a good
And
list.
not to beat the dead horse, but I will point out again, see, this has led us right back to the start. Tax increment and transportation is something that we're working on a regular basis.
And the library too, I'm sorry. Yeah. But so if there's some issues like that, I mean, we could maybe just take them off the list right now if we know the Ledge Committee is already working on it.
Well, I think it's important if it's a regional issue, be it that the Ledge Committee informs mayors and council members or whatever. Obviously, there's a need to know and a need to understand and a need to, have it, know that it's in their hands and know what is happening. And I think that that's fair enough.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it may be as simple as, here's what we're doing. Here's the 10 things we're doing, to address that. And then everybody knows, oh, good, we agree with that and we can set that one aside. Let's move on to the next one.
As part of the letter that goes to David Glass, just suggesting that these, the Ledge Committee reports out to the full body.
More in-depth reporting, I think.
Yeah. I mean, you just need to be given more time.
Perhaps a whole meeting for that or something.
Yeah.
Okay.
Along those same lines, and speaking with Mayor Beauforti a couple of weeks ago, one of the concerns was getting more to the meat of the issues at the mayor's and council members' meetings versus going on about how wonderful our city is and the fact that, there's a Butter and Eggs Day parade in Petaluma and a Kids Day parade in Cotati, when we, for the most part, know that they're not going to come here to the Kids Day, and we're probably not going to go to the Butter and Eggs Day. So why are we spending so much time telling each of the council members about it? And maybe we should work on issues like this. So with the spirit of that, I would like a motion.
Do we need a motion or just direction or?
Motion authorizing the mayor to transmit a letter. And wait till you see this letter.
I'd like to Move that we adopt a motion authorizing the mayor to transmit a letter to the mayors and council members regarding the issues of collective importance.
I'll second that,
Great.
as discussed.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 4-0, 1 absent. And do we have any correspondence or pending legislation? None. So we will go to the city manager's report. Mr. Obid.
All right. Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. So I actually will try to be brief this time. So on water supply, I just thought I'd let everyone know with all the rain recently, locally at least, we have some pretty good news. Lake Sonoma, the water supply storage capacity of that lake is 245,000 acre feet, and right now, as of today, it stands at 228,000 acre feet. So it's pretty close to the point where they start actually releasing water for flood control once it goes over 245. So that's good news. That's our primary source of water here. Lake Mendocino, up near Ukiah. So that reservoir currently is at 66,000 acre feet, and its its water supply capacity is 68,000, so just a couple thousand acre feet away from its flood stage. And Lake Mendocino has a different flood curve than Lake Sonoma. Lake Sonoma is a flat curve, so 245 is sort of a flat limit. If it goes over that, they release it for flood control purposes, right? Lake Mendocino has a kind of a sort of a diurnal curve, and we're at the low point in that where the Army Corps of Engineers releases water that goes over the 68,000 acre feet number. But between pretty much now and March 1st, the water supply pool in that lake gets larger all the way up until March 1st, right around there. And it goes to 110,000 acre feet in early May. So I'm sorry, from March 1st to about May, the water supply pool, the allowance the Army Corps leaves for water supply goes up between March and May. So it's almost at the top of the bottom, if that makes sense. And then, and then as we get into spring, that's why they always say we want spring rain, because as they allow more water to store in the reservoir, it collects. All right, enough on that. I don't want to bore everyone. So, Old Redwood Highway South Preservation Project. So this is another federal aid project. This is the segment of roadway between La Plaza Park and Page Street through our old downtown. We just opened bids on that today, and Craig's evaluating the bids, and I expect we'll hopefully be bringing something forward soon on that. That's a repaving project primarily. And then SMART has been working on the platforms in Picatati Station. So there's guys out there, they're forming up the platforms and getting them going, so that's pretty exciting. And I also wanted to report that our dispatch, the ergonomic project that they were working on with OES, it's an OES project, Office of Emergency Services project. Their ergonomic upgrades are done, I'm happy to report. Yeah, I think our police chief has a couple more gray hairs after this project. He was telling me that there's, with all the different IT computer systems in there, I'll save you the details, but there was something like 7 different contractors in this one little room all at the same time, trying to do this complicated dance where, if one of them does something that gets in someone else's way and the guy's left, they got to try to find him and call him back, and it's just, So it was a very complicated dance, and it's all done. And our dispatchers are now back from the sheriff's dispatch center, and they're now back here at our police station, and the lobbies are open their normal hours in the daytime. And that is pretty much it. I'd be happy to answer any questions on any of those items.
Council, any questions? No. I do have a quick question. When you were talking about the lake supplies, do you have an update on what our wells are doing?
In terms of like production?
And no, on capacity, if there are.
I don't.
Is that hard to measure at this point?
No, I haven't checked, to be honest. But in prior years, you don't see a real rapid change in groundwater level. So when when a well turns on and starts pumping, the water level draws down because it's pumping, and then when it stops pumping, then it recovers, usually within an hour or so, and then that's called the static groundwater level between when it's not pumping. And in past years, when I was monitoring it more closely, I didn't really notice any significant change in water levels. So there was no, things like that are much longer term, and that's what like the USGS, for example, was looking at. Sort of the long term, we're talking 20-plus year trends. And the USGS basically, when they were looking at this sub-basin in the Santa Rosa groundwater basin, had found that this sub-basin, at one point in time, I think primarily because of Rohnert Park's production practices had been drawn down a bit, but it had largely rebounded most recently when they were looking at it. So
Prior to the casino?
No, this is, so I think it was 2002 or 4, somewhere in the early 2000s. Rohnert Park had a settlement a legal settlement regarding this pumping practice. And they switched to more aqueduct water from the water agency and less reliant on their local groundwater wells. And so just that change in practice, I think, is what the USGS is attributed to, a lot of the stabilization of the groundwater in this area.
Thank you. Is there anybody wishing to speak? Public comment regarding the city manager's report? Okay. Seeing none, I'll close that. And now we go to city council reports. Councilman Lemon?
I was going to say none, but speak of the devil, I will give a quick update. Obviously, we're just restarting the legislative committee process this time of year, but I will tell you this, what's being carried over, as you may remember, was that rather big transportation bill, which has been going back and forth, being cut this way and that way, but bottom line, the end result was looking like, and hopefully still looks like, something really helpful. The governor's goal is to really invest in getting the, what is the correct term for the road quality? What was that term?
Pavement Condition Index?
Yeah, PCI. Get that PCI up. And that is truly, as we know from seeing that process here, it's a huge investment. So the latest on that is they were very close to actually having a deal, but one clever politician, I believe in the Assembly, was holding out, probably trying to get more givmes for their local area. So no news on that as yet. But the hope is possibly that works out and gets done as it stands without falling apart and having to be re-put together. And the bottom line is I do want to assure you that on a regular basis, both our Assembly member and our Senate reps and their staff are very responsive to both calls from our Board of Directors as well as letters that we send. It does make a difference to them because, as Councilmember Delasso said, that united voice is very powerful. They appreciate that. And sometimes we're very helpful to them to go up and testify in Sacramento, which we do from time to time. So just a quick update.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Hervey?
Yes, I attended the Waste Management Agency meeting, and I'll just report on one little aspect of that, and that's the composting. So the county is getting very close to signing off on the return of the site. And that's really good news because that means that the money that we had to put in an escrow account to pay the county will able to be returned to the agency. So that's really good news. So we're just waiting for that item to be on the Board of Supervisors to accept the site. But the word was from the county in the meeting was that the site was received very clean. They're very happy with it. The North Coast Water Board was very pleased, and they've rescinded their checking order, so that's good. And then composting will go on at some point, so there was a very large and heated discussion around the relationship between the Waste Management Agency and the county and Republic and various ways for a new composting site to be constructed and operated. So staff is going to create a report clarifying the selection process for a contractor to construct and operate it, the facility at Central. and some potential costs for long-term composting alcohol. That was brought up, that it's possible that in the long run it might make more economical sense to alcohol it. Yes, there's environmental impacts doing that, but then we kind of have to look at the environmental impacts versus the cost to the ratepayers and things like that. So it may be possible, what was brought up is that when all was said and done, it might be a hybrid. It may be such that a smaller facility is built and some of it goes through that facility and other parts of it goes alcohol. So it might be a mix of those. So more to come on that subject.
Thank you. Councilman Dawson?
Yes, thank you. I'll be brief. Sorry I've hit the proverbial brick wall this evening. 2 weeks of jury duty in Oakland, leaving at 4:30 in the morning. It'll do that to you. And 2 more weeks to go. I need a whole box. Pillows. Sonoma County Ag and Open Space is announcing their matching grant program. I don't know if we have any ideas for that this year. I don't know if we're prepared for that. But it's January 28 to March 31. And there's $2.5 million available out there for a variety of projects. They've even been funding, like the work we did, for example, over on the basketball courts. They're even funding things like that, not just large open space ag preservation things. So it's a pretty wide array of things they're funding. And I will be going to the chamber installation and recognition dinner, cheering on my colleague, Councilmember Landman, this Saturday. And that's all I have. Thank you. And I guess one more thing on the matching grant program. It just makes me think, I just want to make sure that we're staying on top of our previous matching grants so then we can get future grants. Just want to throw that out there. Thank you.
Thank you. The only thing I have to report out is I did attend the mayors and council members meeting in Sacramento this past week. Very enlightening. We talked about the Rosenberg rules. We talked about social media that we're going to have to bring up and maybe discuss and how that might apply with Cotati and what we can do to reach out, especially in light of our efforts to reach out for our recreation survey. But there's some phenomenal ideas out there and ways you can actually reach people and get them more engaged that I would love to see us pursue as time and people allowing. And then I was just going to make another reference to the Chamber of Commerce annual recognition dinner and our Citizen of the Year, Councilman Landman. And with that, our meeting is adjourned at 10:23. Thank you.
We have a meeting with Damien on Thursday.
Mm-hmm.
We push it next a little.
Mm-hmm.
We'll be a little bit late that day and get back home.